It's a really great conversation. The last little bit of the podcast, Pat Burns jumps in as well. So we'll get a little bit of him on there, and I really hope you guys are going to like this one. Let's get right into it. Here's Neil Pendleton. All right, we're back with another episode of Hunt Suburbia, again in the makeshift garage studio. A little bit chilly in here, but we'll do. We're hunters, right?
Well, we can handle it. I asked if I should wear my camo hunting clothing, but I think I'm good in the sweatshirt.
Got Neil Pendleton. That's Neil Pendleton there. Thanks for coming, man.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad to do a podcast with you.
Yeah. How you doing, man?
Pretty good.
Yep. You over the whole postseason? Like, are you already ready to get the itch, get back out in the woods, or what?
I mean, I've been out in the woods pretty much ever since the season ended, but yeah, as far as hunting, I always love the season, can't wait to get back into it, but I really think, for me, it's just, I love spending time in the woods, and sometimes after a long season, it is good to finally wrap it up and end. And I mean, the scouting is just the adventure that goes into, learning sign, learning new pieces of woods. I sometimes like that more than the actual hunt. I mean,
do you do anything else in the off season? Like, are you hunting turkeys when turkey season comes up? Are you ice fishing? Like, what else do you do outside of the deer hunting world in the off season?
So I do, in the past years, I've done a lot of ice fishing before. Pretty much that's what I used to do every weekend. But I've gotten away from ice fishing to where I try to now focus more on, spending time in the woods because I want to be as good as I can at hunting.
Yeah.
In the summer, it's like I do a lot of fishing, out of a boat, doing trolling for lake trout, salmon.
Yeah, because summer's kind of like, for me, I don't like scouting as much in the heat. Plus, I'm allergic to yellow jackets. I hate being in the woods with yellow jackets. There's tons of ticks and mosquitoes and all that shit. So the scouting is like the best right now in the spring. And like you, I love fishing in the summer.
Yeah, we've had great conditions recently without the snow until today. You need to get out and find that leftover sign. So it's just been like the springtime pretty much.
Now, what do you do when it does snow? How are you going to change your scouting tactics now?
So you're not able to see scrapes as well. I mean, that's a big thing that I look for when I do scouting. So with the snow on the ground, obviously you can follow tracks and really learn how deer move through the woods. A big buck that I'm trying to target, he may end up obviously doing different things now, but it's just a kind of easy way to see with all the tracks on the ground really what they do and get a chance to figure out new pieces of woods.
I like looking for the crisscross. Like if you get two well-beaten trails, it's very easy to see in the snow, right?
Yeah.
So then if you got that, intersection, I was texting with Pat Burns last night, and he might pop in later. But I showed him the picture of this. Like I was just doing a quick 2-hour hike yesterday, looking for the lucky early shed. I saw you found 3 on like your first day, I think.
Yeah, that's the most I've ever found in one day. Yeah.
And I was out doing that. Just want to get a lucky one. And I was in a conservation piece, which you can't hunt, but there are definitely butters on this piece, so I wanted to get in there, see what kind of big buck sign there was, and if there was something that, looked really big that was worth me building up the nerves to go knock on, some farmer's door and ask for permission, then I'd do it. And I walked up on this double scrape that was pretty fresh. I could tell it was, it was hit in the last week. And a big signpost rub right behind it, and right in the line of sight were, my perfect setup for a camera, right? You put a camera there, you can see both scrapes and the signpost rub in it. And Pat Burns was like, yeah, that looks awesome. That's definitely, big community scrape. And usually those occur at intersections, he said, of, 2 main deer runs. So
yeah, when you find multiple scrapes in one area, and usually don't get lucky enough to also find a signpost rub, but that's usually a pretty good spot. I mean, I've even at times, if I find signpost rubs, whether it's on a hemlock or near a hemlock, sometimes I'll even make a scrape there because it's just another reason for deer to hang out there longer or to go check it.
Yep. So last year you said you got 5 bucks mounted, right? That's insane to me.
Yeah, so 2019, I had a really good season. I ended up getting 5 awesome bucks in 2019.
Sounds like Dan Jarrus, who had that 4 buck season.
Yeah, he had a great season too. I mean, there's been a lot of people. It's like, whether I think the year before, I think it was Armand, he ended up, getting, I can't remember how many bucks, but it's like, it seems like somebody every year has that, amazing season. So
where did you get those 5 bucks? And what states do you stick to just Mass, New Hampshire, and Maine, or where else do you go?
Yeah, those are the 3 states that I primarily hunt. Pretty much I grew up in Maine, so that's where I did most of my hunting growing up. And then in college, I finally started hunting New Hampshire my senior year. I hunted there, and actually my first day I ended up getting a 209-pound buck within the first hour.
Wow.
Got really lucky there, and so of course it drew me to want to start hunting New Hampshire more. And then I added hunting in Massachusetts a few years ago. So it's really been trying to kind of manage my time in the seasons between hunting those 3 different states. And so last year it started off, there was a buck I had a lot of history with. So that particular buck, I called him the Big Six. That was a deer that I had gotten pictures of what I thought was him maybe back in 2013. And then from there, the seasons after, I got a series of pictures every year. And so I think he was really, the picture I got in 2014, he was a 2.5-year-old. So I think the picture in 13 wasn't him. So I was really had some history with that deer. I hadn't hunted him hard. And then the last couple seasons in 2017, I started hunting him a little bit. 2018 and 19, I went really all in for him. I actually had an encounter where I arrowed him in 2018. Unfortunately, didn't quite get the job done, but that really kicked it up a notch where I said, I got to finish the story with this buck. And going into 2019, that was the main focus. I mean, I had him pegged where within the first 2 weeks of the seasons, I had him on daylight, in daylight on cameras 7 different times until I finally caught up with him on October 4th. That's when I ended up getting him. Then the next time I went back out on October 8th, I ended up getting another buck.
Well, wait, why? So, why do you call him the Big Six? Was he a 6 always? Like, talk about the progression of that buck's antlers.
Yeah, so that buck, he had been a 6-pointer most years, like a big 3x3 without brows. Some years he would have brow tines. And then the last year in 2019, which I don't know if it was from the injury the year before, on his left side, he ended up having a split G2. So it ended up turning into a 9-pointer, and he had, his best rack and best brows that year. And so that's where that buck had just having a lot of history. Had a giant mainframe rack. He ended up being 146 and 4/8 inches.
Wow. So that was buck number 1, and that was New Hampshire?
Yep, that was New Hampshire with a bow. Yep. That was on October 4th. So then I had another buck that was in a close by area there in southern New Hampshire, and that was a buck that I had seen that summer. I had seen him on camera in previous years, but I actually had an encounter with him in a thick piece of mountain laurel, and we actually had a standoff for a couple of minutes just staring at each other. And it I think came back full circle, because when I actually arrowed that buck on October 8th, he ended up going right back, and that's where he ended up dying, was right exactly where we had that kind of standoff in that patch of mountain laurel.
Yep.
So that was, back-to-back sits, started off the season, got the monkey off the back.
Back-to-back bow, early.
Yep.
Now, do you hunt in September in New Hampshire? It opens September 15th, right?
Yep.
Do you normally hunt in September, or do you like to wait until a certain time, or were you hunting those first, 3 weeks before that?
Yeah, I get out as soon as I can and hunt, as much as I can. Obviously the strategy's evolved over the years to where what I'm really trying to do at that point in time is go ahead and, I guess, not burn out spots. So I'll still be in the woods. I'll still hopefully be in the game, but I'm going to wait until there's those, really cool evenings, early season, or if there happens to be a cool morning where I've gotten activity on camera, then I'll go ahead and I'll hunt that in the morning. But it's being pretty selective, but I'm always in a tree whenever I can.
Yeah. So, all right, let's talk about these two. These 2 bucks were close by to each other, right?
Yeah.
Like they were pretty close, kind of the same patch of woods, or?
Yeah, pretty much.
And so talk about that patch. Is it a big mountain, bigger woods patch? Is it suburban?
Well, that's what I would consider more suburban. There was, for kind of a suburban residential type area, there was a bigger piece of woods that was where my main focus had been, for most of the years hunting in there. Then the couple years prior to that, I started really just trying to expand the search and hone in to find this deer, to figure out the kind of missing piece of the puzzle, because I would have pictures of him. I'd had a couple encounters with him, but it was really saying, okay, like I got to shift. I got to do something different and think outside the box.
So you were focusing too much on that bigger patch of woods, and you're focusing your scouting on that for years, right? And you have what you would call tunnel vision on that spot, and after, but then you expanded your search and you got closer to the neighborhoods. And tell us about that process, like what you think about tunnel vision when you're scouting.
Yeah, so that's one thing that not only for myself, kind of looking back throughout, the history of me kind of making the steps to try to focus exclusively on like specific mature bucks, that I'd gotten pictures and I would just try to figure out that surrounding area. It's like, and so I would just get so caught up on not expanding the search, not really looking for anything else other than just learning that, adjacent small area around it. And then, of course, throughout the years of having success and, talking with other hunters, I've kind of caught on that they make the same mistake as well. And it's, really looking and saying, okay, well, if there's a buck, he's going to be within a several mile range. In big woods, it, could be a 10-mile range, but in more residential suburban areas, it usually is probably that, kind of 2 to 3 mile range. They could have, a larger range where they shift around throughout the season. There was one buck that I got back in 2015. I had 5 seasons of history with that one. And he would primarily shift between 3 different areas. So he'd have like a summering area. He'd have an early season that was tied into his summer. Then he would shift once people started venturing in the woods during bow and prior to gun season. He would go into another area, and then once gun season started and it got a little bit into the late season, pretty much I think what coincided with snow hitting the ground, he would shift somewhere else and just try to completely disappear. So it's interesting to see how each buck does have like their own patterns, because it's not a one size fits all approach, but it's really just saying when you try to break it down and look, you got to think about those areas where you've never thought of, because if you haven't thought of it, that's probably where the buck wants to be.
Yeah.
And if you're putting all this time and effort into one specific buck and that's where your main obsession and focus is, well, nobody else has probably thought about that area either. So it can be completely overlooked. And that's really what happened with that buck in particular, the one I called the Big Six, where there was a spot that he was bedded near the road where you just wouldn't think it's like that, a buck would be normally.
And it's a process that I feel like will take years and can take years to learn an area. It might be 5 years, but every year you slowly expand your knowledge of the area. Like this year was my first year in a bunch of spots. I just moved here not too long ago. And my first year in a bunch of spots, I put about 5. I like putting 5 cameras in my target focus areas, and it's like within a 5-acre spot, I'll put up 5 cameras and try to see like, all right, which trails are they using more, and then from there I can drop it down. Once I know like, oh, that camera's hardly ever getting hit, these 2 are, I can take those cameras away and expand it outside the range of that original 5 acres, and slowly just expand it and learn more.
Yeah, on that, actually, I'd heard on a podcast recently, because, I love listening to podcasts. It's the best way that you can learn, because you can relate to your own experiences through hearing other people talk about them. And it was. And
you can do it while mowing the lawn or cooking or driving, like all that. It's just passive,
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast when I got out of my truck here. Whatever I'm doing, working out at the gym, when I'm out in the woods, and I'm just scouting, looking for sheds. You'll see in my pictures, I have my headphones in, because I'm always listening, trying to learn.
Me too.
And I was listening to one recently, and there was Steve Shirk. He was talking about how he talks about with putting his cameras out, like the baseball field. I don't know if you heard that one.
Nope.
So he said it's like, you'll have where you think like the buck is bedded as like home base, right? And then from there you'll have, it's like your infielders and your outfielders, so you can expand your cameras out, from that direction you think the buck may leave. And so having, as you said, like your 5 cameras, you're able to kind of really pick and choose, okay, well, is he going to right field or left field? Yep. It's like, and then if you're going to, whether it's to check those or when it comes time to hunt, if you're getting like a picture of him in left field, well, you don't need, if he's coming from home plate, you don't even need to push in until it's time to actually go hunt whatever stand, location you've picked out there.
Yep. And it just happens sometimes, like, out of those 5 cameras, you might get 3 of them that were in the perfect spot and I haven't moved them, It just might be the 2 that have been dead and nothing hardly ever touches it, so you move them. And more I'm finding out that scrapes are just the best place to put a camera.
Yeah, that's where I focus most of my cameras. I run a lot of cameras, and just one thing while we're kind of mentioning is because strategic placing of cameras is obviously what we all focus on and try to do, but I've had sometimes like my best success with cameras where I'm just like, all right, I have an extra one with me, I need to stick it out somewhere and just kind of randomly stick it on a tree, and for some reason, I don't know what it is, I seem to get like a lot of activity on those just those random spots that it's like I don't think it's going to turn into anything.
But it's probably not as random as like somebody who's just getting into hunting and doesn't have any idea, because like if you're a newbie hunter, it can be a daunting task just trying to figure out where you're going to place a camera. You can just like it does take a skill set to like pick the perfect tree to place a camera. It really does. Like you got to be able to identify. A trail, you can see trails, right? That's so you can always put one just on a trail. And it's going to be, if you're new and you don't even know how to, like a lot of guys will hit me up and they'll be like, I don't even know what a scrape, they get all flustered because they second guess what a scrape is. They'll be in the woods, they've been hunting for 4 or 5 years. and they won't know what a scrape is, or they'll second guess themselves, like, oh, I just don't know. No one's ever showed me. No one's ever. But it's like, it's plain as day.
Yeah.
It's
Once
a
you know what
scrape,
to look
dude.
for.
Yeah. You know. So even just like finding a place to put a camera can be daunting to some guys.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, you know, whether it's scrapes or rubs, I mean, they're a great place to start, and then it's what you're trying to accomplish with that camera. And I think that's a big thing for anybody, is whenever they go in the woods trying to figure out, well, what am I trying to, you know, get out of this? And so if it's, you know, placing cameras, are they trying to just figure out where deer are moving through the woods? Or are they trying to get intel of what bucks are in those woods? And that's obviously a difference with scrapes. You may not get as consistent movement of deer, but it's like you may be able to, you know.
You're going to get bucks, yeah.
You're going to get bucks and does.
You're going to get does too, yeah.
But it's one of
for
those.
sure, bucks are going to hit it.
Yeah, and then if you find that, you know, that nice community scrape, it's like you're going to get most of the bucks in the area, and then you can really kind of branch out from there and formulate a new game plan.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a rule of thumb or just the areas I've been putting up, you know, scouting this past year, but pretty much everywhere I put a camera on a big old scrape, which we'll call a community scrape, every time I put a camera up on one of those, it seems like $5 is the number. I'll get $5 that visit it, pretty much within a week, you know, of me putting it up. And if you're putting scent on there too, I've been using Chad scents, and they're just, I can't believe every time I freshen up a scrape and put, you know, the licking branch scent up there. I mean, within hours, because I'm always putting up, when I'm using his scent, I'm putting up cell cams. I just want to see if anything's going to visit it, and usually within 4 hours something's coming by. And I just did yesterday on that perfect spot that I talked about, 2 scrapes and a signpost rub, put the scent up. I mean, deer have not stopped visiting that scrape. $2, a spike, and a really shitty looking little 6 that's just really weird looking, and a ton of does just hitting that scrape.
Yeah, I mean, I see that
and
all
it's
the
almost
time.
February.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be year-round on scrapes, but what you were saying about, you know, whether it's fresh scent or, you know, freshly kicked up dirt, the deer will go to that. You know, if it keeps happening consistently, well, it's, I guess, no longer fresh if you're always putting new scent down or always freshening up a scrape. But if it's a scrape that hasn't been opened up in a while, you usually do, you know, pretty soon after, and it will be a matter of hours.
They can smell that fresh dirt.
Oh, yeah.
Know? They can smell that. I should mention, you know, Neil's credentials is a great hunter. 37 years old, $7 over 200 pounds, killed at least 45 bucks. A lot of huge ones. We were talking last night. Well, he got 5 mounted last year, and he's running out of wall space, and he's like, I gotta put some kind of a parameter. I can't just put every big buck I get on the wall now. There's got to be like a baseline, right? What do you think it's going to be? Are you going to do inches? Are you going to do stories? Like, how are you going to determine if you're going to put a buck on the wall now?
It's a combination of all that. I mean, you know, like that, the big 6 buck, right? That was a buck that I had so much history with. So, I mean, for him, he was going on a pedestal. I had already said before I got him, I mean, if I'm going to have years and years of history with a buck, at that point, I don't care if he has spikes on his head, because I did have the other buck that I've hunted for so long. The one that he was a 192-inch, 10.5-year-old, 237-pound, 22-point, just the buck of a lifetime, right?
Yeah, I was going to mention that one. I mean, it just looks like it's an Iowa buck, you know. That thing is...
in southern New Hampshire, you know. I didn't believe it. I that kind of brings me to something that we have in common. It's like I grew up in Maine, you grew up in Vermont, and so we grew up not thinking about hunting, you know, whether it's, you know, New Hampshire, Massachusetts.
Right. We talked about that too.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's just I never did until then. All of a sudden one day it's like, okay, I've, you know, seen bucks, I've seen does, and I got a camera, and I mean, I literally got sick in my stomach. I'm queasy. I'm, you know, running out to my truck to text my dad, weak in the knees, and I just couldn't believe what I had seen, you know, for just that caliber of buck. I thought you had to go to big woods to get pictures of big bucks, and it wasn't the case. And I mean, that buck really led to the journey. But
and that buck was, so you said 10.5 years old, 237 pounds, and it was just very thick too. I mean, the mass on that thing was incredible. Let's talk about that. Well, then we'll jump back in and finish the story of your $5 from last year. But let's talk about that one right now.
What do you want to know?
What's the story with it, man? From start to finish. Did you have him on camera before? Did you?
It's a long story. I mean, we don't have time for all, you know, 1,492 days.
Oh yeah, right.
But yeah, I mean, to give you kind of, you know, the quick summary is, you know, I'd gotten his picture. You know, like we'd said, I had tunnel vision. I just sat right in that area. I hunted him there the first season. Luckily, Plan B was pretty good. He was a 215-pound buck. he grossed, in the 130s, and
You probably killed Plan B, didn't you?
Plan B didn't make it past me because, to be honest, it's like when I killed him, I didn't even know if it was him or the other buck or Plan A. It's like I didn't know.
I thought you killed as soon as you started like listing off his stats. He was approximately 200.
Yeah, no. So yeah, Plan B didn't make it. He was a pretty good consolation prize. I still had the opportunity, the way that you get tags in New Hampshire to keep hunting, Plan A. But it didn't work out. And I'm glad that it didn't work out. I mean, that buck taught me so much, after the years, and, kind of really forced me, because when you can't stop thinking about a buck, I mean, every single day, it doesn't matter if you're out fishing, if you're sitting at work, there was not a day that went by, in that span of 5 seasons that I didn't think about him. And I mean, that's where, so going into, the second season, I kind of still focused more on that area. Then from there, starting probably, in the second and the third season, that's when I started venturing out. And I said, okay, I got to expand the search. I got to start hopping across roads, going into different pieces of woods. And then I felt like during the third season, I had, an encounter with him. It was after legal time. So we walked by my stand after dark, and I got a, beautiful, view of him walking in the moonlight behind my stand. It was just epic. And then the fourth season, I had him dead to rights. He was done, and it just happened to be there's one of those things that it gets screwed up by someone else accidentally, and so 4 years in the making of knowing exactly where he was going to be and when, it didn't work out. But going into the fifth season, I had at that point the highest hopes, and finally then on October 18th, that's when he moved into a bedding area, which I had known really well. I didn't expect him to be that early in the season.
How did you know he got in there?
Camera.
Yeah.
So I just started a couple years ago using the cell cams, but this is one, it was a little bit of a pain to get down and check, but I'd go down and check it periodically, and I just happened to check it. He was there. There was a cold front coming in that weekend, and those October cold fronts, they're amazing.
Yeah.
So it's, at that point, I even called my dad and said, Dad, you got to get down here from Maine. It's like, this is going to happen. It's like, I want you to be here for it. And of course, he wanted to be there to also have a chance. But
some confidence going into that day.
And it wasn't necessarily even that day. It was that weekend. But when you've done this for a while, it's like those days are killing days. It's like I've now the last few years.
And where he goes to his bed and comes out. You knew his main trail.
There was a scrape that I was hunting near that, and so yeah, it's like I knew he was hitting that scrape morning and evening. Coming in and out of that general bedding area. I think I know the bed exactly where he got up from, but I can't say with 100% certainty because there's a bedding area there, and for whatever reason he'll lay down in a different spot. But
and what kind of woods? What kind of what kind of scenario is it terrain wise and woods wise?
That was, a thick area, a bunch of kind of briars and, swampy, type area.
200 acres, 1,000 acres. Is it suburban?
So yeah, that was, pretty suburban, as far as where that goes. It was in a heavily hunted area.
And he's the buck of a lifetime, even if you're, Iowa, whatever. If you're in the best states in the country, he's a buck of a lifetime there. So there had to have been other hunters on him. Many people must have had pictures of him.
Not just, everyone knew about this deer. I went to Bass Pro when it first opened in Hooksett, New Hampshire, and they had the Bush Light, Legends of Fall trailer, and you walk into the trailer and it's just 250-inch monarchs, on the wall. And there was one kid, he pulls out his phone, he's like, I know of a buck like this, and he's literally saying the roads near where this buck lives, and I'm just like, shut up, don't, what are you doing?
We already got 100 guys on it.
Yeah, it's like nobody else needs to know, stop talking about it. But that's where it's just, once a buck lives that long in a certain area, a certain piece of woods, they learned how to survive, and that's what he had done. And I obviously was real fortunate to take him and learn from him, over those years. But you can really learn a lot if you just say, okay, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? Where are they going? And you just got to just keep after and expand the search and, do something different, every year, every summer, and just keep scouting.
What did his rack do over the 5 years?
So his rack, actually...
Was he at his biggest when he killed him?
Oh, yeah. He the most inches. He probably would have, it's he might have, I don't know if he would have netted maybe better in previous years, but he was really clean, the first year. Back in 2011, when I got pictures of him, he was clean. I can show you kind of a video montage that I have later on, where it's all the pictures. I kind of put him in a series. You can see how his rack changes through the years. And a lot of people, it's you go from a real clean buck And then in 2012, you could tell he had more of a crab claw on one side. He was starting to, you're like, is he going downhill? It's like as far as the rack. And then in 2013, he started like a flyer coming off the back. It was almost like a drop, but it, stuck straight back. 2014, just he started to kind of, change on one side where he's going non-typical. And then in 2015, he just, that one side just, completely exploded. And it could have been due, to a lot of different factors. He had certain aspects throughout his rack that stayed, that kind of changed and would morph throughout the years. But I did pull a bullet out of the base of his neck at the top of his shoulder. Wow. So it was either, from a muzzleloader, it was like a copper, sabot. So it was either, shotgun or muzzleloader. And, I talked to a bunch of people that had either, thrown arrows at him or thought they had even hit him with arrows. And just after, having got him, just the stories, I still to this day can go to an expo and somebody will be like, I got pictures of that deer. It's like, and tell me a story in an encounter with him.
Have you ever seen Black Mirror, the show?
Yeah.
The one where they like, everything is recorded through your eyes and you can rewind. And
yeah.
Like, check this out from like 5 years ago. And can you imagine going through a buck's like that's life and just see what he saw and all the freaking arrows that he had to avoid? And it's just incredible that you're in a heavily hunted area and he survived all those hunters.
Oh, I just think about that one guy that got the bullet into him and has to watch him walk off and never get a chance to recover him. It's, in between.
I'm surprised you haven't met that guy. Like someone didn't say, I shot him.
There might have been, and again, I've heard so many stories. It's like there might have been one person that thought they might have, seen a buck of that, kind of caliber. But I remember even talking to one guy that he had an encounter. He walked by at like 20 yards, snowing, like, a blizzard. And he drew, he couldn't even draw back his bow on him because he had not only buck fever, adrenaline, it's freezing cold, and just was, awestruck and couldn't even make it happen. And this deer is, he moved differently from other big bucks I've had encounters with. He looked like, the way I've described it, is like an action hero in a movie. The bullets can be whizzing by him and stuff can be happening. He just takes every step with just a purpose and just doesn't seem like he cares. He almost like thinks he's invincible. It's like the way he would move.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about so one thing you mentioned with this buck is that you had to cross roads and kind of scout him a little bit differently, right?
Yeah.
And one thing you wrote down is Pat Burns said about scouting, especially in urban areas, but just when you're looking at a map, pretend like there's no roads there, right? Because they cross them all the time.
Yeah, so, I have a lot of conversations with Pat. It's just been great. We met at a Boston bow hunter, pig roast. He had all his sheds out. And so from then, two passionate guys about the woods, we hit it off. And so we have tons of conversations. And just the other day, we were talking about, scouting, like looking at maps. And so really when you start, I think one of the topics we were talking about was big woods versus small woods hunting. And it's so easy when you start hunting small woods to look at a map and to see roads, to see houses. But the phrase that he had said, I'm going to fumble his, phrase, but it was like literally those lines need to vanish and disappear and just see the woods, whether it's a brook and if they're going to follow that.
It's kind of like just zoom out.
Yeah.
Because when I look at, I'm not always on OnX. I look at Google Maps or Apple Maps, whatever, all the time, and just hit satellite view. And if you zoom way out and you look at the state of Massachusetts or whatever, and you're just like, all right, let's look for green here, and then you can start zooming in, and I'm thinking about towns. I don't even know a good example, but you start zooming in and it's like, oh, it's green, but there's a lot of houses in there. It doesn't look like there's very much huntable property. But if you zoom out, it's still all green, and it's kind of like what Pat said. Just even if you let the houses vanish.
Yeah.
Just zoom out and just look at it and go,
you have to look at it, from all aspects, whether it's, looking at the satellite images, the topo terrain features, which is great about OnX, being able to switch between, the hybrid overlays, the topo terrains, the satellites, taking the houses out, but then also, then putting the overlay of the houses and saying like, all right, well, if I'm looking at this one piece of woods, well, where are the connecting pieces where there is a break between houses? Because, not that deer won't walk through yards, but if there's, a break where they can cross a road more easily, slip into a bigger piece or even a smaller piece from a big piece, those connecting pieces are, where I would kind of start to focus. And
it doesn't have to be a huge strip of woods to connect it either. It can be a very narrow connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, then it's like, where if I'm looking at a piece of woods and I'm just saying, okay, like, especially, during the COVID shutdown, that's, all we could really do for the most part was get out in the woods and go for walks. And I was doing that every day. And so I would pick just a piece on the map, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go into it. But how I break it down is I would just start by, let's say if it's a circle or a square, walk the perimeters. And as I'm walking the perimeters, I would go ahead and look for, okay, where are those breaks? Where are there tree stands? Where are there other hunters? Where is there more pockets of signs? And if I'm finding a spot where, okay, there's good sign, there's scrapes, there's rubs, there's, tracks that are laid down, and there isn't hunters, and there's connecting between other pieces of woods, well, all right, this is a spot where I want to start getting some cameras out. And, I mean, that's where when you start really trying to, figure out not only a piece that you've been hunting and have history with, but new places. And sometimes it is better to go at it with a new approach because you don't have bias. It's like in a spot that you've hunted or you have history with deer. So it is sometimes easier to learn it because you can kind of get in your own head when it comes to spots you have history with.
Yeah. And on that note, like when we were talking big woods versus small woods, and you grew up in Maine, I grew up in Vermont, and just the ignorance of, my deer camp is steeped in tradition, right? My grandfather built it with his buddies, and they were all like Washington D.C. G-men, right? They suited up G-men. He moved up to Vermont, and they built this thing, and just the tradition is old. It was like 1950 or whatever. So I go out there my whole life growing up. I can't wait to get there. Once I do, it's like, this is where I'm hunting. I'm only hunting here, and it wasn't even like looking to Massachusetts when I moved here. It was like I wouldn't even look outside of the pocket of woods where my deer camp was. Yeah. That's the only place I ever wanted to hunt, and where I thought in my head, because I'm partial to it, this is the best place to hunt in the world.
Well, it's that camaraderie, the tradition, it's family, it's like, and that's where like some of the differences too is that, like, I mean, this year actually in particular was probably the most I've ever hunted with, buddies, friends that I have in my whole life. And when I get asked about that, I mean, I think you've heard, maybe Dan Anfield talk about it. It's like characteristics of a serial big buck killer. It's like they don't hunt with other people. They're completely solo, and you will be more successful. You don't necessarily have to worry about meeting up with somebody, being back to camp. It's like, because all that stuff kind of takes you away from the hunt, but it's fun and more rewarding in another way. Deer camp, you can't beat it.
But I do like being, hunting with at least one other guy that's not too far away, and you guys are hunting a similar piece and sharing. That is really, really fun. But I'm with you. I mean, this year I did most of my hunting solo. I had my best year yet, and made a step up in the level of bucks that I'm killing, and I'm hoping to keep doing that, next year and continue on that journey. But there is something about, like, when I'm at my camp in Vermont, and if I'm the only one that's, and I have been recently, the one that's most hardcore. I'm out there an hour before daylight, an hour before shooting light. I'm walking in at, 4 a.m. in the morning. Sometimes I have to drive a half hour, so I'm up at 3:30, and then I won't be back until 6:30. And I'm going in the dark and coming out in the dark. And, there's not very many hunters doing that at my camp now, where back when I was younger, I mean, everybody was. There's something to be said about, that other people are in there all the way till the end too, and it gives you, like, it feels better. Yeah. But when everyone's leaving early and they're back at camp, by 3 or 4 o'clock, and you're the one that's way out, you're still out there, it feels kind of lonely, and there's a weird feeling about it.
I mean, for me, it's kind of the opposite in some ways, and I think maybe that's part of why I've kind of been successful as I have, is because I, grew up, hearing with my dad, I always talk about when he went to a deer camp, he would make sure he was the first one up, the last one back. It's like, because if you put in more effort than anyone else, I mean, you're probably likely, going to have, more success. And I think that kind of leads me to a topic that I just feel is really important is, setting goals. It's like, I mean, whether it's deer season or anything else, it's like, what do you want out of the experience? And, sometimes it is, achieving that goal of, taking a big, target buck. Sometimes it's like saying, hey, I want to enjoy it. It's like, I want to have the camaraderie and hang out, with friends, and be back to, deer camp to tell stories. And so it's really just saying, as you go through your progressions and stages, because I do believe that back when we take, hunter's ed, they teach you those stages, and there's all kinds of, different, stops along the journey in between, but it has a lot of truths. And so it's really about, setting goals going into each season about what you want to accomplish, and then really trying to put in the work to make those things happen.
So when you get to a level that you're at now, where, I mean, you killed 5 big bucks last year, and we're going to go through the 3 remaining that you haven't talked about, but you killed 5 big bucks, you're running out of wall space, you got a 192-inch buck under your belt from New Hampshire, which is incredible, bunch of 150s, What's your goal look like for this season? Have you set it yet? Are you still thinking about it? What are your goals now?
I haven't really set it yet because, a lot develops in the off season. Putting time in and as you go and you get closer to the season, you can kind of really have, a better, opinion of that. And I think, to kind of give you a story, on that is going into last season, right? I come off killing $5 in 2019. I'm not going to have a follow-up on that,
What did you do in 2018?
2018, crap, I need to think here for a second. 2018, that was the year before, so that was the G2 buck late season. So that was, high 130s, with a bow late season. Trying to think what else I got. That season. I can't remember if I got one in Maine. I'd have to kind of go back through pictures and look. But I've kind of always consistently over the last 10 years since I kind of made that switch in 2011. I actually just kind of looked back. So I wanted to do kind of like a decade, last 10 years recap. There was 24 bucks. So I average usually, $2 a year. There was the one season with 5, one season with 1, and so pretty much every year it's now said, okay, like I need to set goals not only on what I want to focus on as far as like bucks, but how I want to focus my time. When you start looking at hunting multiple states, you have different seasons, different methods, different tags. You kind of have to go at it with an approach and what you want to get out of it. And I think kind of referring back to Pat, right? You guys in a previous podcast had talked about the monkey that's been on his back because he's had one buck he's after.
Yeah.
And I had that.
Nuts.
Yeah, and it's going to drive anyone nuts. It's like, so from 2011 to 15, I had that. So it's like I got that monkey off my back. And then I said, okay, there was another buck that I was focusing on that I called Dr. Jekyll. He just disappeared in, would have been, I think, the 2017 season. Don't know what happened. That's when I shifted to the big 6 that I had known about. So then I wanted to complete that mission, which happened in 2019. That created, I think, the domino effect to, okay, well, now I can do different stuff. I don't have to just focus on one particular buck. And the dominoes just started to fall. And so after that, as far as like, kind of setting up goals for a season, going into 2020, I had said that I want to focus on the early season because I hadn't had, a ton of great success in the early season. So I set that as one goal. Then I set tracking as a goal. I wanted to spend a lot of time, chasing snow in the big woods because I've done a ton of stand hunting, had a lot of success there. I've done well tracking, but I just love the adventure, and it's that kind of new thing that I really want to just, get really good at.
Yeah, so you want to try to knock out some early bow, early season bow kills so that you can spend some time tracking, right?
Yeah, if I could kind of, where I'm at right now with the 3 states that I hunt, if I could kind of, lay out like a template, for a season.
September, $2 New Hampshire. Massachusetts, $2 by October.
On. You still got to, maybe in October, because you get Mass doesn't really open up depending on what zones you hunt until halfway, kind of, into October. So, yeah, get one. Come
November, you can go to Maine.
Yeah, so if you can get $2 September, then, October, it's like you can make the decision. Do I start bow hunting in Massachusetts? You get your muzzleloader tag in New Hampshire.
Chase the snow.
Yeah, do I save that? Do I chase snow? And you can kind of see what your cameras are showing. Mm-hmm. And then it's, going up to Maine, but then you can't hunt Sundays. So then it's like, well, do I hunt up north and hop back over the border and hunt New Hampshire so I save my gun tag so I have that?
Yep.
And then it's, well, do I want to use both Massachusetts tags with a bow if the opportunity even presents itself? Or do I want to wait and grab a shotgun or a muzzleloader and head to snow in December in Massachusetts?
So do you think diversity of your hunt and changing stuff up might be the key to not getting burnt out? Like, I don't know if you listened to the Brian Visco podcast last week, but it was all about that. Like, he got burnt out. First, he was chasing that same buck, and it killed him.
Yeah, going after pops.
And it's like Pat too. Like after that same buck, I don't know. I think there's something tells me that Pat, even if he doesn't kill him, that's not going to burn him out. He'll be fine. He'll move on and roll with the punches. Everybody's got different personality. But do you think like that's the key? Because you haven't got burned out yet, but you have such a high bar now because of all these big bucks that you're killing, right? And it's not out of the question for you to get $5 in a season of all great caliber. So how do you not get burned out? And you can't really expect to keep elevating. You're not going to kill 570s in 1 year.
I just love it so much. And for me, it's like, yeah, there is frustrations. Even going into this season, it's like I wanted to get, another, one of my target bucks. I mean, the early season buck that I killed this year on September 19th, you know, beautiful, you know, probably in the 130s, you know, 8-pointer, 190 pounds. So that was great. I achieved that mission, but he wasn't one of like my targets going into the season. So I had those targets, and unfortunately, it was frustrating. I had other hunters move into the area. The patterns got disrupted. Things changed. One of them broke off his G3, so the rack got messed up. And that really kind of, you know, sent me for a loop on the season. And yeah, I could get frustrated. I, you know, could get pissed, and I could make excuses saying, "Oh, that ruined stuff." It's like, no, it's like, well, you just shift and adapt. And I just left those woods alone completely. But that had been pretty much my whole focus for, you know, October going into the season. And there's just so much woods to hunt. I think that is one piece of advice that I would give to people is have a backup plan to a backup plan to a backup plan. And especially if you run, you know, as many cameras as some of us do. I mean, I ran 60 cameras last year. I mean, I had throughout the season between 15 and 20 different cell cams. And I mean, it could be a full-time job checking and managing, but I mean, I had cameras in 20 different pieces of woods. And so it's just trying to not burn yourself out and focusing on one area, not spending too much time focusing on cameras, and just really kind of seeing, it's like, okay, where is the season going to take you? And you know, if there is a buck, it's like that you're really, you know, after and obsessed with, and you think you have a chance at him, go for it. I mean, put the chips down and spend the time, because you won't regret it. But then if you have the opportunity, well, hey, this buck popped up and I got that gut feeling says I can slip in here and kill him. Well, go do it if you're not going to regret, you know, taking time away from that other buck. And I mean, I think that's where, you know, it's like I had that opportunity, you know, in 2019, and then, you know, going into this season, you know, it's just saying, hey, it's like I loved being able to diversify, you know, and hunt with different methods, different seasons. And I mean, I don't want to say luckily I didn't have a giant, you know, 170 plus that I was obsessed with. So, I mean, that can be a curse too. It's like,
Yeah.
so I mean, with that, it's been really fun. It's like having the options. And I know for anyone, you know, whether it's like Brian, it's like, I mean, he was focused on, you know, that buck, and I would have been too. It's like I would have just done everything that I can, you know, to get it. But when you don't have closure, you know, to that story, it's like it takes something away from you. And even when you get closure, it's that deer's not there. It's like you don't get a chance to do it again.
Yeah, and after like a week of thinking about that podcast, listening to that, and reflecting on the conversation with Brian, I feel like there is something to be said about changing the way that you hunt. If you're not hunting the same way all the time, or the same patch of woods, or the same buck, anything the same can really burn you out. If you're doing anything in life the same, day after day after day, that's going to burn you out. The key is to switch it up. You got to keep yourself guessing. And what's awesome about America is, I mean, we just have the best hunting in the world. In the world, the opportunity,
Yep.
The fish and game and the laws for conservation and everything. We have the best opportunity of anywhere in the entire world, and every state is different. All the laws are different. The game you can hunt is different. It's varied, and it's crazy. We have to be able to take advantage of that. And up in the Northeast, we're, I think, even more blessed. Like these guys in Iowa will say that they're the best, or Kansas, they're blessed. You know, these big Illinois bucks, whatever. We are so close to so many different borders of states that have different laws and different rules and regulations that you can keep yourself pretty much, keep yourself guessing, changing shit up all the time. You can go up to Maine one weekend and chase giant bucks in the snow and track them. And then you can come down into a tiny suburban plot in Massachusetts and hunt with your bow.
Yeah, and I think on
complete
that,
opposites.
Yeah, and I think on that, I mean, one thing that, you know, when I think about that is that, okay, I mean, you know, I live, you know, it's like, you know, southern New Hampshire, work in Massachusetts, you know, right on the border. So from that standpoint, most people, it's easy to hunt and scout close to home. I mean, if you're traveling outside of an hour, it's going to burn you out. I mean, just to be able to get a place
we're just
to
like
hunt.
a buck. We spend 90% of our time in 10% of our territory.
Yeah, and so with that, it's, you know, it's like, I mean, you're venturing out, you're traveling away, and so as much as I love big woods, if I could pick, you know, okay, you have one hunt left, I'm going to the big woods. I mean, that's what I'm doing. But I also know that I can't probably, you know, put in the same amount of time, it's like that I could around home and find areas, you know, to learn and, you know, scout. And I mean, I enjoy the scouting sometimes just as much as I actually do hunting. And hunting kind of sucks sometimes. You're sitting in a stand, you're freezing, you're cold, you're bored. It's like, but when you're scouting, it's like you're looking, you're active. It's, you know, you're on the go.
And you're not worried as much about like jumping a buck or something. When you're scouting, it's just like it's free.
Yeah, and you can just go and
There's
roam.
no pressure.
Yeah, and that, I think, having that, diversity for me has been awesome. That it's like I can say, hey, well, when I have time, I can take off. I can, make that longer drive somewhere, and I can spend, a couple of days hunting big woods and, just literally leave my truck, at daylight or before daylight, and then not come back till after dark. And, it's like just that adventure. If, for people that haven't done it, it is amazing. But then you do have the comfort of, okay, hey, it's like I can wake up in my own bed. I can drive somewhere. It's in a spot that I've learned. You could either have trees picked out or, stand, pre-hung. You can get in it, and, then from there, it's like you can, I guess, have the kind of feeling that you are going to be more successful. It's more planned. You've controlled it more. And so that's where I would say, for anyone, it's like, don't pass that up. But if you get to the point where you are getting burnt out or you're getting stressed, because it is a lot of stress. I mean, let's face it, small woods, it's like you have to deal with, boundaries. You have to deal with legal distances. You have to deal with other hunters, access to woods. I mean, all this type of stuff. So it is a lot of stress that goes into, not only being successful, but worrying about, like, am I going to show up today? Is somebody going to be in the parking spot? It's like, am I going to get seen walking in and out? Is somebody going to complain? So when you go to the big woods, you don't have that worry. It's just you. I mean, maybe some guys worry about, getting lost or something like that.
Yeah.
But other than that, once you get comfortable, it's freedom. You can just roam and just explore and truly enjoy it.
All right, quick announcement. Heron Hill Winery is back. They really appreciated what we did for them last year. The first 4 months of the podcast. I appreciate what they did for us, which was give us a little bit of money to pay for the equipment that we use for this podcast. And if you enjoy this podcast, you want to see it keep going, what we need to see is y'all supporting the sponsors. So support Heron Hill Winery. If you're buying wine, don't go down to the store. You can do it on heronhill.com. Order whatever you want. They got a wide array of wines, and it's free shipping for anything that's 6 bottles or more. So you really can't beat that. And if you're a first-time buyer, use code HS5 for Hunt Suburbia 5, and you'll get an additional 5% on the first buy. After that, it's going to revert back to just what their volume discounts are. But every time you order, we're going to get credit for it, and that's going to help us keep a long-term sponsor happy. Keep producing amazing content for you guys week after week. We're going to get better video equipment eventually. We're going to expand what we're doing for content. So it's not just the podcast, but if you love the podcast and you love wines, or your wives or your girlfriends love wines, somebody around you does, get it for great gift. Use code HS5 at checkout if you're a first-time buyer. If you're repeating as a buyer, just go on there and order up, and we're going to get credit for it. And I really appreciate you guys supporting the sponsors. They appreciate it, and thanks a lot. And I'm going to, at some point, I'm going to do podcasts that break down the rule books and the laws that vary by state, at least in the northeastern area up here, because every state's completely different, right? Setback wise and things like that. I mean, what's New Hampshire's setback? It's 250?
It's 300 feet, so 100 yards.
300 feet, and what about from a road?
It's the same as far as hunting. No, from a road, I don't even know.
It's here at Mass, it's 150 feet.
It's I don't know. It's kind of common sense. As long as you're basically off the road, pretty much. It's
yeah.
like same as Maine.
I know Vermont for years was 10 feet off the road.
Yeah.
You could literally be road hunting, see something, get out of your car, and walk 10 feet off the road and shoot it.
Yeah, and that's how it is in most of the Northeast states. I mean, that was kind of one of the things that deterred me about Massachusetts is all the different bylaws. It's not just state laws. It's like, so you have these little differences.
The town bylaws, yeah.
Yeah,
and we were talking. That goes back to like the problems you get when you're hunting in smaller areas. Like I was telling you, somebody called an anonymous tip line and said, they heard the podcast about my 6-pointer that was behind my house, and there's no way it could have been the legal distance or whatever. They don't realize that I own land back there. Onyx isn't like the quickest to update who owns which pieces of land, but you deal with that crap when you're hunting in smaller patches.
Yeah, and it's tough, to manage other people. So that is tough, but that is one. I mean, great thing about podcast, Facebook, with the forums that are on there. People can share the information. Obviously, don't trust all of it when it comes to laws. Look it up yourself, but you can really kind of learn from other people, like about it's like, okay, well, I have an opportunity. Maybe you go to Maine and hunt the big woods. Oh, I can hunt Sundays in New Hampshire, and I can't do that in Maine and Massachusetts. And so you can really start to kind of learn and expand. It's like, okay, well, this is the opportunities that I have during a season. So it is, really kind of eye-opening, because some people don't like hunting in the heat early season. Some people hate hunting in the cold. So you can really kind of figure out and pick and choose, what you want, to get out of it, and I guess kind of mimic what other people are doing too. And that's been something that I know with, meeting people who are involved in hunting, just to share and bounce those ideas off has been great, because you meet other people who are as passionate as you. I mean, I don't know about you, but it's like most of my close friends now,
Dude, yeah.
They're all from messaging, through Facebook and meeting other hunters.
I mean, that is the single best thing so far about this podcast, is meeting so many great hunters, creating friendships with them, and, learning so much from, hunters that are way better than me. But the networking is awesome. And you realize, like, how small the community is of hunters. Even in the U.S., we're a small community. But then when you narrow it down to, like, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and us northeastern hunters, we're an even closer, tight-knit community. And all you guys all know each other, though, the top hunters, and you're definitely one of the top hunters up here. But, like, John Petricks and Neil Pendletons and Patrick Byrne and Brian Viscos, everybody knows each other because we are so close, and everybody wants to share their stories and just talk with other people who are super passionate about it.
Yeah, and whether you've bumped into somebody, I mean, I know Brian from back in the TP archery days. It's like I met him back in 2012, 11, somewhere in there. It's like John, it's like, whether it was meeting him at the pig roast, messaging online, Pat, was there at the Boston Bowhunter pig roast. And so it's just, whether you bump into somebody or you just shoot somebody a message or they shoot you a message, you're going to get connected with everybody. And I mean, it really just brings everyone close together, and there's that camaraderie, there's that support, and it's unbelievable.
And it's funny because, like, when I was getting more requests to get you on the podcast, and I was seeing all your pictures and your, your interactions and all of the different forums and pages and stuff, and I'd go to Facebook to message you, and that's when I realized, like, we talked way back in September.
You started the podcast, and I was just like, yes, a new podcast. I'm like, this is awesome.
I send you a message like, hey, I saw your comment on the New Hampshire. Somebody posted in New Hampshire, like, hey, anybody know any new podcasts? And I commented on there, like, hey, I started one Northeast, and I was watching that feed of everybody that was, like, talking about new podcasts and looking for new ones, and I messaged like 50 people that day, like, hey, I don't know, I just started a podcast, 2 episodes in or whatever it was. But that's how it was early on.
I was literally going and walking a piece of woods, and I just started down like some power lines, or I don't know, like a long dirt road or whatever it was, and that's when I stopped. It's like, and shot you a message. I'm like, oh, new podcast, this is great. And I think I had commented on like your intro song, right?
I think most people listen to this podcast just because of the intro song.
Oh, it's awesome. It's like, I mean, I played it for my girlfriend the other night, and it's like, we're singing along to it. It's like, it's just it's catchy.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes you just feel really comfortable going into it, and you've had great guests on, and I think that's what's awesome about the information sharing that's out there with fellow hunters.
Yeah, and it goes back like when I interviewed Pat, and we figured out that we both were rappers or songwriters and stuff in the past. And
I never knew that about him. It's like I've been talking to him for years, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, like, you used to be a rapper, and I looked it up after this podcast.
And if you just look at his Instagram, you're like, holy, what the hell is he doing with Rick Ross and P. Diddy? Like, he's got pictures with like these like huge rappers. You're like, what the hell's going on?
Well, next thing I know, it's like I'm looking up Sev One, and it's like, okay, like on YouTube, I'm the man.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, wait a minute, I've known Pat. I'm like, how come I didn't know about this?
Oh, the whole story, his story with how he got in with like the Celtics players and stuff, and they started help funding his idea. I mean, it's just awesome.
It's great, yeah.
But like when I was I had recorded the first podcast, and I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to do for an intro? And I'm friends with Chris Dalty and the Big Woods Bucks guys, and they're my favorite hunting podcast. And I love their intro too, with the fire cracking and the door opening, and
it's authentic. We all know those sounds.
I love that. And I was thinking, like, I gotta do something similar. I want to do some crunching in the leaves and the sound of like, your arrow thwap, your string thwapping after you shoot, and hearing the deer run away and stuff. And I was like, man, I don't know how to freaking go do that right now. Where am I going to find those sounds? I know how to write songs. I'm just going to write a freaking song. I wrote that thing in like 15 minutes.
I was going to say, I was kind of disappointed I didn't get the chance to hear you sing it before this podcast started. I thought you did it live at every episode.
Oh, man. But yeah, I mean, isn't it interesting, going back to like just a few minutes ago, how similar bucks are to us? just us. Like I was, where Hal always says in the big woods, you got to narrow down the big bucks territory. They're spending 90% of their time in 10% of their territory. That's their home range, right?
Yeah.
We do the same thing. And like you were saying, like, you hunt close to home because it's convenient, and you hunt there more often than driving 4 hours to get to the big woods because it's convenient. But we do venture off to the big woods.
Yeah, you hear about those big bucks making those random excursions, right?
Oh, yeah.
Throughout the season, they just take off and roam.
But they're going to be in that 90% like we are in our houses most of the time, or within very close proximity to our houses. When we go to work, we take the same route pretty much every day. Every once in a while, we'll go, I want to go check this field over here, something to drive by this and see if there's deer or whatever. So we'll change our route and do this thing. It kind of doesn't make sense if you were watching our patterns.
Yeah.
We go to the same...
Well, it's like Joe Donito. It's like, I don't know if you've heard his analogy about the highway.
No.
So it's like, he's talking if you're tracking a buck, right? They're on the highway. They're just cruising, right? They're straight line, and they're not even sidestepping. And then all of a sudden, they start to meander. Yep. It's like, okay, well, they get off the exit. Okay, they're making a turn off the exit, and then, okay, they're going through some neighborhoods. They're starting to slow down. They're zigzagging a little bit. Maybe they're feeding here. Maybe they're nibbling there. And then all of a sudden, it's like they kind of turn into the driveway of their house, and you're like, holy shit, like, they just made a complete, 90-degree turn. Well, this buck, he was feeding. He was zigzagging a little bit. He's probably getting ready to bed. And so then, of course, you really got to put the brakes on then. But it's like they are probably going to be bedded there. And it's like you're literally at that point. It's like, you pulling in your house. It's like before you go to sleep, you may grab a bite to eat. You're tired after a day's work. And
if somebody was watching our GPS movements on that, they'd be like, wait, this is weird. They're out of their normal, their normal routine.
And then, of course, another comparison between bucks and people. It's like, I don't know of any guys that have ever done anything stupid when it comes to girls.
I was just going to say, like, when we get our rut lasts all year long, but it's like when we think about one thing and one thing's on our mind, then, we can be pretty stupid.
Yeah, we're all animals at some point, right?
I'm going to tell a story about dumbass 18-year-old me, Jesus Christ. Graduated high school, going off to college. Not going to see my high school best friends because they're not going to the same college as me. And we go on this trip to Avalon, New Jersey. My buddy's got a beach house there, and $1 million beach house, whatever. And it was like this awesome adventure. We're going down to Avalon, New Jersey. I've never really traveled much outside of Vermont at that point. But it's like, hey, 18, graduated, let's go have some fun. We were there for 2 weeks. I kind of fell in love with this girl down there that I met down there. It was just like, didn't fall in love, but it was like lust. And I was like, we had some fun together, and something happened where like after that, she didn't talk to me for a few days, and I was a dumb little young 18-year-old kid. I like went to like,
couldn't get out of your head, huh?
She wasn't like hitting me back up, and I like went to where she was staying and took like little stones and like wrote like I heart whatever her name was in the road in stones.
You've seen deers do this before?
They've done something similar to that, but they end up getting arrowed for it. But Jesus, I wish I could have got arrowed for doing that. That's cringe.
Oh yeah, no, it's like there's always those similarities and stuff, and it's there's just so much stuff that with people, animals. It's like there's those similarities, and I think a lot of it.
We like to eat the same shit too all the time, but
yeah,
every once in a while, if we run out of it, it's like I'm going to go on to that next thing. It's the same thing with bucks.
Yeah, and I think it's some of those things too. It's like whether it's the stuff that we do, whether it's stuff that deer do, is you can relate to these things, and so it's trying to a lot of times is asking why. It's like, well, okay, why. It's like you may venture a little bit further away. Why. It's like you may eat something different. So it's when you see deer doing stuff, it's like you need to always kind of ask that question why, because I don't know how many times people have come up to me. It's like at an expo or I bump into somebody at a store and they're like, oh, hey, Neil, it's like, I got this picture of this deer. Can you help me? It's like, okay, you got a picture of a deer. It's like, well,
what the hell did he do the whole day?
Well, I was like, yeah, well, where was he coming from?
Yeah.
You can see, like, literally, they haven't even thought of that yet. It's like, well, where's he going? It's like, what was that picture? I can't see the timestamp. Was it, evening? Was it morning? It's like, was he, going to bedding? Was he coming from bedding? Is it food? Is it the rut? Is he chasing does? Because, some people even ask, that excursion thing, right? Well, it's like the only time I get pictures of this buck is, in November. It's like for like a week and then he's gone. Well, okay, what are you asking? It's like, well, they're like, well, how do I find him? You're not hunting where he lives. Like you're hunting.
You're in that 10%.
Yeah.
Where he only spends 10% of his time in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, so at that point, yeah, it's like, I mean, there's that 90% of the woods that, the deer aren't using. And so you need to, figure out how to write that, off the map and figure out, where they are using. And then it's like, okay, why are they using it? When are they using it? And when you start asking those type of questions, you really can, kind of figure in and hone in a little bit more. And I think even sometimes it's hard to do just by yourself. So we talked about forming relationships, having buddies. I know, this season there was, myself, Kevin Plant, and Steve Champa. We had a group text, going. And so like every day we're sharing stories leading up to the season, and we're bouncing ideas. And to be able to have other buddies that, that can even challenge you too.
And to keep each other motivated.
Yeah. So it's the motivation, but it's also, I mean, obviously friends give each other shit all the time. But that can motivate. But then when you also challenge, just because someone has an idea and they think it's right, it's like even myself, the success that I've had, it's like, having, Kevin or Steve, challenge me on something. It was great because then you can say, okay, well, wait a minute. They do have a point here. It's like, I was thinking about that, completely wrong.
Yeah. Different pieces of opinion. But what we're talking about goes back to what the allure is of following a deer's track in the woods and tracking too, because you really you live the life of that buck when you're tracking him. He may have laid that track 8 hours ago. When you're on that track trying to close the distance, you are living those 8 hours that he just did, and you learn everything he's doing. You can learn from it, and Hal talks about that all the time.
Yeah,
but you can do that in the small woods too. You can do that in the suburbs. You should always try to learn everything you can from the buck, even after. And a couple guys talked about it. I think Brian was one of them. But after you shoot a deer, even if you see him fall, even if he falls in sight and he's dead, go up to where you found your arrow, analyze the blood on the arrow, analyze everything there. Yeah, even if you're in snow, you can backtrack and see where they came from before you shot them. Learn that way. But like pretend like you didn't see him drop in sight and trail it and try to find them, stay on the blood, all that stuff. I learned this year with both deer. Like they didn't show much blood at all at the site, where I shot them. The arrow had blood on them, but I didn't see blood for 30, 40 yards, and it happens a lot where they won't start bleeding for 30 or 40 yards.
Yeah, the second buck I got this season, yeah, I mean, he didn't bleed. I mean, he bled the first initial 50 yards. After that, nothing. He went into like a swamp. There were like that swale grass. I combed that for, probably like an hour, hour and a half. I'm like, all right, this is in New Hampshire. I'm like, I'm going to have to, call a dog in. And I'm like, this sucks. I'm like, it's like, I know I, walloped him. I think it was probably more of a liver hit, maybe a little far back, but I'm like, there's got to be blood here. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm pretty confident. He probably didn't go far. He's probably dead. And so I searched where I'd seen him go in that direction. Yep. And then I just said, okay, well, maybe he made a little bit wider path to the left and just kind of made that last second 90-degree turn before he perspired. And sure enough, I happened to just walk over there and boom, there he is. But sometimes, yeah, you'll get those scenarios where you won't get blood at all. And I mean, one thing that you were kind of talking about earlier that I wanted to touch on, it's been on my mind quite a bit, is you talked about, when it comes to tracking, right? It's like you get to live in the life of what the buck did and follow in his footsteps. And something that I don't have a very good imagination. So for me, it's like, it's something that I need to kind of work at, because whether it's heard, the big woods bucks guys talk about, the mountain deer guys, listening to Rodney Elmer talk about, one phrase that he always said was, you need to get in the mindset of that deer when you're following that track. And so to have that imagination, that's kind of one of my, goals for next season, is going into when I do track, is really, I think, slowing it down and not just thinking about what the track is going to do. It's like, what was the deer thinking when he laid this track down? Like, why was he doing what he's doing? And I do have to probably get better at forming that imagination. I remember back when I was a kid and I got into hunting, at 11, going into 12, 13, 14, 15, whenever I walked in the woods, like I would probably in some ways be more successful at seeing a deer because I was really imagining where they were going to be and just visualizing. And so I've kind of gotten away from that a little bit because it's more just, okay, well, I'm following it. I know that they're probably going to be there, so that's where I'm going to see them. But I'm not really kind of trying to make it happen in my mind. And so that's something that I think for people getting into tracking that is really important. It can also make it more fun too.
Yeah, absolutely. And wrapping like that part up, like I think it's pretty good advice for a new hunter. Like a good way to simplify it is just, dude, you are just like a buck. Think about what you do and try to relate it to yourself while you're on that track. It's as simple as like, what would you do if you were a buck? What would the buck do if they were you? We have so many different parallels. Like, just try to step back away from it a little bit, because I used to always overthink everything. I'd be even like coming to like going back to the camera, picking a tree to put the camera in. I would sit there sometimes and just kill myself for 45 minutes trying to find the right tree. I know the general area I'm in, but I would go, what about this tree and angle this way? Yeah, well, then I get that path, but I'm missing that scrape, and I would overthink the crap out of it.
I've done it time and time again.
And the same thing while I was hunting, like overthink so many different things, dude. It's like just step back and get back to the basics.
Yep.
Hunt over a scrape. Like I think that was the biggest thing I learned this year is like, dude, if there's fresh scrapes around, get in there and hunt those scrapes.
Well, yeah, I mean that's another topic is, some people are afraid during the season. They don't want to mess up their woods. They don't want to, it's like do too much in-season scouting. So I'm going to, scare the deer out. No, I mean, you got to find that fresh sign. It's like you can't hunt where you're hoping a deer is going to be because you're just wasting your time. And so whether it's, in that same piece of woods, pushing in further, and finding, the fresh scrapes, it's like finding where they're feeding. That's stuff that you have to do because if you're not in the game, you're wasting a ton of time. And so if it's not happening in that piece of woods because you're not finding fresh scrapes or you're not finding where they're feeding or where they're bedding, go somewhere else. I mean, don't be afraid to, do that in-season scouting because it's just as important as it is sitting in a stand. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, you talk to or you hear it's like, a lot of the, successful, big buck killers, and they either have a gut feeling or they're highly confident. So if you're going in there saying, well, I just hope tonight it's going to happen. I mean, yeah, it can. And I hope for you too. It's like, but the odds are it's probably not going to. You have to push it further and gain more information to kind of make it happen.
I found a really good spot. I can't wait to hunt next year. And it was late season. It was after I tagged out on bucks, and I had doe tag left. And I think like December 23rd, I found this spot. And I got in there and put up some cameras. And, man, that place was hot. There were so many deer in there. I jumped and got videos of bucks. I mean, I've seen 4 different bucks in there just going in like to check cameras and hunt does. I've seen 4 nice bucks. And now it's just on the ground every time I went in there. I didn't go in with a stand or anything. I just went in with my bow on the ground. And, it was super late season, but I was going in looking for a place to kill does. I found all these nice big bucks. I think some of them are same bucks that I got that are, in a piece like a mile away. But just from what I could see from the naked eye, I think they're some of the same bucks. And now I know another piece to the puzzle. Like that buck I saw a mile away in November pushing a doe, and here he is up here too. So just expanding your knowledge throughout the season.
Yeah, it's expanding that search like we talked about. And then I mean, you were also kind of talking about like scouting and hunting at the same time as well. I mean, I'll go in, especially when you're talking, hunting September, early October, you have warm days. At that point, it's probably useless, to go out if you're trying to hunt, a mature buck at that point. Because you're probably not going to be in the game. He's probably not going to move during daylight, or you're going to get too close to the bedding area. But I'll go ahead and I've started, I hunt with stands. I hunt, with saddles too. It's like, but I'll have, a light pack set up, where I'll have, a saddle in my backpack, some sticks, like the little platform.
Yeah, I was going to talk gear with you. Let's go through some gear, yeah.
Yeah, well, and on that, before we kind of get to the gear, is that, like, I'll do some of that scouting, and it's like, I may never climb a tree. It's like, right. But if I do find a spot, it's like, okay, yeah, it's like, I feel like this is a spot worth climbing for that last, hour I can get set up.
Yep.
Then I'll do it. But, at that point, if it's an evening that the conditions aren't right, it's not probably cool enough, I'll just scout, and, if I'll have an extra camera maybe in my pack or something and hang that. But, don't be afraid. It's like to just switch it up and just scout instead, even during the season. But, yeah, as far as gear, what do you want to know?
Well, I don't know. I got a Predator platform there that my buddies got. I'm really good at fantasy football, but I couldn't focus the time on it this year at all. And I haven't watched a single game of football. I really want to. Tom Brady, I think, is going to win another Super Bowl. I love him. I'd love to see him.
You got to hope. You can't root against that guy.
So I got to watch. It's going to be the only game I've seen this year. But so I recruited a couple of my friends that are into fantasy. I was like, "Can you guys just take over my team because I can't pay attention?" But I got a great roster. So they did, and we ended up winning it. I did paid absolutely no attention to it, and I forgot that we won. I forgot that there's any money, whatever.
Yeah.
They sent me the tethered
awesome
Predator platform because I do want to get into saddle hunting.
Is this the regular one or the XL? This must be the regular, probably.
I think it's the regular.
Yeah, that's what I have. I have the regular. So I have probably almost every piece of hunting equipment or gear. I have 2 of I have one of the new Lone Wolf company Novix, because they're kind of rebranding. So I have their, which is I guess a version of their Alpha stand. I have an Assault stand.
The climbers.
Well, and I'll get to that. I have
Yeah.
so the two hang-ons, the smaller and the bigger. Then I have the hand climber. So I have the smaller version of that, even though I'm a bigger guy, 6'3". I just like less weight, smaller, kind of, I guess, size on my back for lower profile. I have two Summit stands. I have like a Viper and a Titan. I have the saddle setup. I have the Phantom. I have the Predator platform. I use that. And then I have, a shit ton of just, cheapo hang-on stands.
What's your favorite to hunt out of, though? Or it's different depending on the scenario.
Where I'm going to kill a big buck. It's like, I don't know. It's completely different.
But some guys get into saddle hunting and they go, I don't need anything else. Why would I? Because you can.
So with that, why I don't, I guess, I totally get why some people say that, but if I'm especially scrape hunting, a buck's coming to the scrape. He knows, he's checking wind, he's doing everything before he approaches that. So from that standpoint, like, I don't want to be exposed, even if you're hiding behind a tree. It's like you're a larger scent profile, you're standing up. It's like, so I'd rather be sitting down. Most of the big deer that I've killed, I don't stand up. I'm sitting down. I'm set up. So the scrape, the scrape's to my left. So
like my Summit stand's got that front part, and I always have to stand up.
Oh yeah, that's why the only time I use Summits is if I'm gun hunting. I stopped using Summits quite a long time ago because of that bar. Because I've had bucks come in where they're right underneath me, and I can't shoot because the bar's in the way.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. I know there's open-faced stands, but I haven't used them.
Yeah, and that's why. So when I position the stand, it's like I'll try to plan on it's like where the buck's going to come from. I'll even try to position the hanger the right height, so that way it's like if I did stand up, it's not going to be in the way. If I got to shoot off to my left, and the hanger's not going to be in the way.
Yeah.
But it's one of those that I can just grab it off the hanger. I can just kind of sit the bow in my lap, be clipped in, wait for the right opportunity, draw, and then just let it fly. So I don't even have to stand up.
I'm pretty sure the hanger, like when the biggest buck I've been hunting, 150 something class, maybe 160. When he came in, he was with a doe. The doe was in front, obviously. I'm pretty sure the hanger blew up my spot. Like the bow was hanging there, and it was a little bit of wind, so it was just doing this.
Oh.
And I think that movement, because the leaves were all off the trees at that point, and like that was the only movement. And I turned around. She was behind me. I turned around like this, and she was pegged up there. And I think it was that. Yeah,
and you talked about overthinking stuff, but that's the type of stuff that I do is because. If at the moment of truth, if there's something that can go wrong, it will. Especially those big bucks are like cats. It's like they have, instead of 9 lives, they probably have 18 lives. It's like,
well, that one did, the huge one you killed.
Yeah, they're all like that. It's so. From that standpoint, even the hanger, whether it's the movement you talked about, mine is sometimes it's like you take it off and there's that little teeny creak, when you set it on or take it off. So there's all these little things that I try to think of, those details and go through those kind of scenarios. You're sitting there waiting, for hours and hours. So it's just trying to think about all those little kind of ways to perfect the setup.
Yeah.
Whether it is, putting sticks in, like little branches to have little leaves to have extra, cover and stuff. I've tried it all. But really, I think if you can, go in an area, whether it's, a pre-hung stand or just do, kind of like a hang and hunt, that is probably going to be, the best way to be successful.
But I think your point that needs to be repeated, that's really good advice, is about the scrape. If you're hunting a scrape, it's a fixed location. You know that the buck's going to be back at that scrape. And if it's a community scrape, even more so, you can hang something that's more permanent around a community scrape. Put a ladder stand there because they're going to be back there year after year, and then you'll never have to use it again. Maybe not ladder, whatever, but put something that you're not going to have to do all this climbing. And
so this is where the small woods versus big woods stress scenario comes into play, right? If you put a ladder stand, there's a chance you could show up and it could be a guy sitting in it, right? So not only that, though, the deer could see it and kind of identify that in some way, whether it's scent on it. So there's all these little kind of nuances to think about. Even a camera, right? If there's a camera there, you talked about some guys that may not even know what a scrape is. They could be walking through the woods and they could, go ahead and now all of a sudden, there's a camera there, there's a stand there, there's a scrape there. Oh, this is a good spot.
Yeah.
Whether they end up hunting there or they just spend more time there. So, you kind of have to look at each scenario for what it is. If you have kind of like your own private piece or you've found a spot where there's not going to be, probably pressure. Yeah, I mean, you could, put that ladder stand there. It's like you could, have a hang on.
A ladder stand might deter people too, though. And the other, playing devil's advocate, somebody can go in and go, oh shit, someone's got this spot claimed. Right?
Yeah, there is that, that goes into it. So it's just, you kind of have to.
You're just rolling the dice.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to think through, all those scenarios. And so that's where, to that point that I was kind of making earlier, is that when you're in, areas that there is a chance of more pressure, there is all that kind of more things to think about, more stress. And so when you go to those, kind of bigger woods and get away from people, you don't have to think about that or deal with it as much. But then again, you're further away, the more travel. So you don't have as many options. But from a gear standpoint, I mean, it's trying to figure out the type of hunting that you want to do. So, I mean, obviously, having the saddle set up, it's, great for mobile. I mean, I've even put some just stick setups in trees. So I have sticks already there, so I can just climb up the sticks. So it's like a semi-mobile setup too.
That's what I'm going to want to do this year, I think, is, and I bought, last year, there was I forget the guy's name, but he's a really good hunter, and he was down in Norton, Mass or something like that. And he was leaving. He's like, I'm out of this state. I'm retired. I'm moving to Pike County, Illinois. I got some land there, and I'm hunting big bucks the rest of my life. But he showed me all these huge bucks he killed in Mass. Great hunter. He was getting rid of a ton of shit for not free, but pretty damn close. He was really good deals. I got those sticks from him and 4 hang-on stands, and I have no idea how to. I've never even hung a hang-on, so this summer I'm going to practice with those things. And these sticks here, I'm going to put those into some spots, but I'm with the tethered platform. I need to get a saddle, and I know the sticks for climbers are pretty expensive, but I got to get some more of them and pre-hang some spots that I find some early activity in.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's great information. I mean, that I kind of look forward to maybe even hearing about your experience in a future podcast, talking about some of that gear, learning it, because there's so many people that haven't experienced saddle hunting. I mean, I was fortunate, that a couple of buddies that let me borrow stuff. I mean, that would come over to the house. It's like practice, and so it's like, I mean, because I have so much gear. I mean, I have guys throughout the summer that'll stop by to shoot in the backyard, throw arrows, climb trees, and just try out different gear. But it's also then, okay, like whether it's an aider when it comes to with the sticks, trying out different aiders. It's like to see, okay.
I don't even know what that is.
All right. So it's like when you have sticks, you can space them out further if you have like kind of a small ladder, right? So you can, have a ladder that you hang off a stick that's just like a rope ladder.
Because they're so expensive, you want to use the least amount of sticks as you can to
lighter
get up a
weight
tree.
Too. I mean, I don't want to be humping in 5 sticks if I can do it with 2, So there's all these little things that go into it. And so, I mean, that's where when you get the chance to share that information, try different stuff, you really can, hone in what works for you and how you want to do it.
I think somebody's here.
I was going to say, either that or you got a,
Pat Burns.
Either you got a stalker outside creeping around. I mean, I don't know if you have groupies yet or not, but
I think Pat's coming in. Let's take a quick break, and I want to talk about your bow and your arrow setup after this and what you wear in terms of clothing for hunting too. But let's take a quick break, say hi to Pat, and maybe set up another mic.
All right, sounds good.
All right, just want to take a quick break and remind everybody that's listening, please, if you haven't, go on to iTunes or the podcast app, anywhere that you can leave a review on the podcast. iTunes and the Apple Podcast app are the best places to do so because it really helps in the rankings. Go in there, leave a written review, tap on the 5-star rating. It's going to help us a lot in shooting up the rankings and getting this podcast out to more people, and I would really greatly appreciate that. Go and subscribe on our YouTube page if you haven't yet. It's Hunt Suburbia, youtube.com/Hunt Suburbia. Of course, follow us on all of our social medias. Continue to interact with us, and if you have any questions or anything you want to send me, shoot me an email at huntsuburbia@gmail.com. Really appreciate you guys. All right, we're back after the break. Pat Burns has joined us. He made a great entrance with a bunch of bone in his hand.
Armful of sheds.
Armful of sheds. But dude, we opened the garage door when Pat got here. Went outside. Had to relieve ourselves in the snow. One of the best things men can do is pee outside. It just feels amazing all the time. We go out to do that. I noticed that
You're like, holy shit, check this out.
What the hell? Well, first I'd made a joke. I was like, hey, look, it's a buck track. And that was actually a cat track. I think that was my cat. And then I look, and there's a big dog track there. I'm like, the fucking coyote came up the driveway while we're in here recording. And I got to thinking, well, I checked some cameras. There is a dog running around. Unconfirmed if it's a coyote or not. I think it might be a coyote. And, dude, a coyote is a hunter. They're hunting deer like we are. He heard me and you talking about hunting. And he wanted to get in the conversation.
He had his 2 cents to add, and he's like, wait a minute, you got that part wrong? I got some more info for you guys.
Yeah, he's like, I can tell you what those deer have been doing, and I can tell you where they've been. But that he literally went all the way up to the garage door, and it looks like he sat down there and listened to us.
He circled my truck.
Circled the truck.
You could smell all the remnants of dead deer from Neil's truck and came to hunt it, looking for scraps.
He's like, let me get into the conversation, boys. All right, so yeah, we got Pat here, but I want to tie up. We were talking with Neil about the $5 he got last year, and we went through the first 2. So I want to go through the final 3. First 2 with a bow, right, in both New Hampshire.
Yep. So there was we talked about the story of the Big 6 a little bit, and then so that was on October 4th. Then on October 8th, that's when the next time out there was another buck that I had pictures of and had some intel on. Got that buck because I just had a gut feeling he was going to be there. He was in the area, and so knew I could get him too. So I got those 2 bucks. So then I was done for a little bit until the mass season opened. So it was kind of back to the drawing board because unfortunately New Hampshire cut me off when I got the 2 bucks. Couldn't keep hunting. Then so I put time into scouting in Massachusetts. Then at that point I did a little bit of hunting in Mass. Then muzzleloader season opened in New Hampshire, and there's a spot where I've had some success in past years. And actually, I had a trip that I was going to be taking to Jamaica.
Yeah, muzzleloader it's like early in New Hampshire.
Yeah, so it starts. It kicks off the gun season.
Again, going back to like the diversity of the northeastern states, it's like you can Vermont muzzleloader is the last season. New Hampshire is the first. I mean, you can bounce around and do different stuff. All right, so you were going to Jamaica to hunt deer.
So I guess there is whitetail deer in Jamaica.
There is.
They started a hunt thing.
I just saw that.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
One of my good buddies, he had a wedding, destination wedding, and I wasn't too happy about it. He scheduled it in November, so it was November 10th. Both him and his fiance, now wife, they both hunt too. So
congrats.
Big congrats to them. But of course, when you hear there's a wedding in November and it's a destination wedding, wasn't necessarily too happy about it. But luckily, I'd had success in the season, so at that point, it was no worry. And I think I was flying out, I think it was Saturday morning is when I was flying out, I believe. And so Thursday night, November 7th, I ended up getting that morning, I got a nice buck with my muzzleloader. It was the last time I was
So you can get $3 in New Hampshire.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So I got that buck on November 7th. With the muzzleloader, that one was 209 pounds. So then I ended up going up to Maine. I usually spend a week hunting with my dad up at his camp. I go up there.
Big Woods?
Yep. So big woods hunting. It's over in kind of eastern part of Maine. It's on that border of kind of northern Maine and central down east.
Augusta
area.
type.
It's further north and a little bit further east, kind of more over towards Calais area.
Yep.
Over in that neck of the woods. So I got up there the night before Thanksgiving, and there was snow coming down, first snow of the year. We don't often get snow up around my dad's camp, so it was the perfect opportunity to do some tracking. Night before, my dad asked me, hey, what's your plan for tomorrow? I'm just going to walk up and shoot one. I mean, snow on the ground. What else are you going to plan on doing? And it worked out. Found a buck track, hopped on it. Exactly 1.0 miles later, I had tracked him down and jumped him out of a bed. He had gone up on top of a hill, and there he was standing back looking at me. So that was a 6.5-year-old, also 209 pound.
Wow.
That seems to be kind of my number. Out of the 7 over 200, that's the third one that's been 209 pounds.
Isn't Maine's area code 209? No, it's 207.
207. Yeah, close. So that.
What did that one have rack wise?
It was kind of like just a funky, those Maine racks.
Yeah, Maine.
Yeah. So it was short tine, stubby, but had some nice mass to it. So it was just one of those unique characteristic racks that you're not going to see many of. So that was the first time I'd ever hunted with like an AR style. It was a Sig Sauer 716 DMR Gen 2. So it's like a 308.
Again,
AR
we're talking about like diversifying your hunt. That's another thing that you can throw into all the different rules and regulations on all the different states and stuff. You can hunt with so many different weapons.
Yeah, I mean, it's just great. I said for tracking in big woods, you mean, you think of like pumps, like 7600s, you think 760.
Yep.
So I had said, well, hey, if I'm going to go semi-automatic, try to get into that realm, I mean, what better than kind of like a, military platform, Sig Sauer, local company gun. So I'd gotten that 308, and that's what I'd tracked him down with. So at this point, 2 with a bow, 1 with a muzzleloader, 1 with a rifle. So that was Thanksgiving Day that I had gotten him.
The last one was with a spear.
A slingshot. So then I was left at that point, done in New Hampshire, done in Maine, coming back to Massachusetts to try to, do some tracking in Massachusetts. And if you remember in 2019, we had a lot of snow. I actually met up with a guy sitting right next to me here. Yeah, so Pat and I, we had done some hunting together, and I was seeing quite a few good bucks, just couldn't seal the deal. It was one of those when you're tracking, sometimes it's just split-second decisions, and whether it was, that one drop tine I saw, there was another just giant mass-racked buck, and finally I went into a new piece of woods doing some tracking. There was a river, and this buck, speaking of coyotes, I think the strategy for them in this area were to cross the river. So whenever I'd get on the track, like the buck, he'd go across the river, I'd scoot back out to the main road about a half a mile, walk back up the river a half a mile because I couldn't cross it, and I'd get on his track, and he would oftentimes just bed on the other side of the river, and he would scoot back across the river. He had done this several times.
Do the Yotes cross the river? And actually, something I don't know.
No, the Yotes, they don't like water.
Right.
Yeah, they usually won't go across water. And
especially that river was moving too.
It was high at that point. Yeah, with all the snow and melt off. Yeah.
Is this in the Berkshires?
No, this wasn't. This was in Central Mass.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that year, I don't know if any of you, had seen that are listening, but that hunt, up in Maine, the buck that I gotten on Thanksgiving Day, that was a brook that I had crossed that morning. I was taping up. I wear wool pants, but I also wear like LL Bean Gore-Tex pants, and so I found with both of those, as long as you tighten them up and you go quick going through a brook, I mean, you can go almost waist deep water and scoot through it, and your feet won't get wet. So I wasn't shy in going through, deep water, but this particular river, it was moving. So every time he'd go across, I'd have to walk out to the main road, come back up, and he kept scooting across. And I was going to be working later on that day, so at this point it's getting, late morning. And once he had gone back across, it was like, I don't know, third or fourth time, I said, all right, I got to give up. It's, time to call it quits. So I said, let me walk up the river. There's an old clear cut that's grown up, probably 10-foot high whips in it. Let me just go past that along the river. I'll cut around the end of it, and I'll walk back this tote road to head back to my truck. I just get to kind of where the end of the clear cut is, so I'd walked probably, 150 yards, and there's an 80-yard patch between the river and the clear cut. I had hugged the river, and I just get all the way to where the end of the clear cut is to kind of loop around the back side of it, and I see his track come back across the brook. And of course, you're probably thinking, well, how do I know that it's the same buck? Well, he had one of his pads. I think it was the left one was a little bit shorter than his right, so it was a pretty distinct track when you can see that difference in the pads. He had come across the brook. He had walked along the edge of the clear cut about 80 yards off to the side, and we'd actually passed each other. I'm going up the brook. He's coming down the brook, and you could see where I got on his tracks. We were talking about earlier, getting the mindset of the deer. You could see him get nervous, anxious, and antsy as I walked by, but he's like, all right, this guy has no clue I'm standing here.
He was watching you.
Yeah, he was. And so then I followed his track. He got past the end of the old clear cut that's grown up. It opens back up and kind of goes into this open softwoods patch. I got there and said, he's here somewhere. He's looking back at me, trying to see if I'm following him. Didn't see him. Took a couple of steps. See rack take off, and ended up right before he got back across the brook. I'd sighted down an opening. I'm waiting for him to come through it. Didn't pop in the opening. Pull my head up from the scope. Oh, he's the next opening over to the right, closer to the brook, just standing there. So I swung over, shot him, and luckily he didn't make it back across the brook this time. And that was kind of the end of the $5 season. He was a beautiful, late season, Massachusetts, just great character, that, kind of texture through the rack. So he was a beautiful
what were you using
buck.
for a gun on that one?
Oh, that was a shotgun. So,
okay. Yeah. So 1 shotgun, 1 muzzleloader, 1 AR, and two bows.
And yeah, with those, the 2 bows and the muzzleloader were from a stand.
Renaissance man.
I know.
Then the AR and
One
the,
on horseback.
The shotgun was on the ground tracking. So.
Yeah. But so that's what we're talking about, variety, man. You're not going to get burnt out if every season you got variety like that, right?
I don't see how it's. I mean, there's always a new challenge, a different way to go about it, and yeah.
And earlier, Pat, we were talking about like the last podcast. I don't know if you listened to the one with Brian Visco, but he was talking about how he got burned out, and it was basically chasing 1 buck and him not being able to get that buck. It just like killed him.
Pop. The legend of Pop.
And he couldn't get him, and it killed him. And you've got a scenario like that right now with your buck you've been chasing for 5 years, and Neil and I were saying I think Pat's got a little bit different personality than Brian, where if he doesn't end up getting your buck, the electric buck, that it's not going to kill you,
Oh, no.
It'll kill me. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
going to be pretty disappointed if he doesn't get it done.
No,
But.
I'm going to get it done. We're getting it done.
Well, and I mean, that's where I was actually thinking driving down here, because as we talked about earlier, the buck that I hunted from 2011 to 2015, I had something similar, to Pat, where there was just that unforeseen, kind of wrinkle in your plan that messes stuff up and kind of, throws you for a curve in the season. Well, that was in 2014 for me, and I got him in 2015.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling pretty confident that Pat had his wrinkle, and next year it's time to seal the deal. So
Yeah, I'm feeling good.
I could just tell though when we had that pot. I mean, I think that was like early November or something. You still had a lot of the season left, but you were still like, you know what? And I'm just ready for him. Even if he just drops his antlers, it's the end of the, to this season's story for him. And I guess
Still waiting now. Literally.
Yeah, still waiting. Yep.
Literally, last night he was in there now. Still antlers on
Still
his head.
holding.
Actually, it's 8:30. I should be getting pictures any minute. So we'll see.
Let's see how well he knows this buck.
we going
know.
shed hunting tonight?
I know. I literally would.
Snow
I'll
on
go
the
back.
ground? Yeah.
I'll be
I was
back.
talking about you can go shed hunting tonight. Why not?
I almost-
If you have a
I almost did last night.
If you have
I
a
was
nice
contemplating.
light and go out like that can really illuminate a lot of ground. If there's snow, and
If you know they're there, I mean, to me, it's one of those things that you got to train your eye. Me and my buddy were out a few weeks ago, and we're just checking cameras in this area, and we weren't expecting to find anything, but we're just checking some cameras at a real remote spots. We hike all the way out there, check the camera. And every buck on the camera had been there within a week, and they were all holding their antlers still.
Yeah.
So we're just going and looking at all the patches where they're digging up, and we're just looking and we're talking. And he looks down, and there's a monster shed right there from one of the bucks that didn't happen to be on camera. But, I mean, my eyes are trained for it, and I didn't even notice it.
No.
It just blended in that well. And, I mean, we were right above it, and he's like, ah! And we grab it and pick it up. I got a video of it I'll show you after. And it's crazy how good they blend in.
yeah.
Oh, you can miss a lot. I was
Oh, my
listening
God.
to a podcast the other day, and there was a guy talking about how he shed hunts with his son, and he has a dog. And he said for years, the dog would take the lead, he would be in the middle, and his son would be behind him. And he said the amount of stuff sometimes the dog would miss and he would miss, and then his son would find. And they'd be all within 20 yards of each other.
Oh, yeah. I've gone into the same areas. I have a few honey holes that, they tend to winter in these areas, and I've been in them and grid searched the hell out of them. And every year, I'll find an old chewed one from a few years ago that somehow I missed in previous years. And I know that I've walked almost the same path, because it's thick corridors of cover that you got to kind of move through. And sometimes it's just the way the light's hitting that day. That's why I choose to go out on usually overcast days. It kind of evens out that contrast for you.
Yeah, and right after a rain.
Yeah, that
is
makes
good,
a difference too. Yeah.
Because the leaves are a little darker.
Yeah, they're flatter. It kind of flattens the ground out. They
But
stick
doesn't
out
the
more.
snow doesn't it help?
If
'Cause you
they're
can see
on top of the snow, yeah.
Well, what if even if they're under? Sometimes the tines will still be sticking out.
Yeah,
Like,
but
I've seen a
so
lot of
are
good
branchers.
pictures.
I mean,
Yeah.
yes, in some cases, but I mean, for example, this snow that we just got is very sticky. At least out where I'm at, it's all on the trees. All the trees are
Yeah.
coated, so every branch that's sticking up
Yeah.
is coated. So every antler is going to be the same way. So usually you got to wait for it to melt a little bit for it to stand out. But I mean, if the snow's been down for a while, I find it to be easier because you'll see where they're feeding, you'll see the runs, and then it can kind of stand out.
And if it gets to be a hard snow, then they shed and it's laying right on top.
Yeah, exactly. But when it's under it, and it depends on the size too. I only got one eye, so that's why I tend to find bigger ones.
Do you?
Yeah, I'm blind out of one eye.
Really?
Yeah.
Which one?
My left.
can you get like LASIK or anything to like?
I don't think I can
reverse
do
it?
anything,
'Cause
no.
Neil's talking about getting LASIK. He's blind in both eyes, kind of.
I know.
Yeah, I have perfect vision with corrective lenses, but without them, I can't see anything.
Yeah, no, I was born like that, genetic. Both of my, two of my kids have the exact same issue and the exact same eye. My mother had it.
Wow.
So it's, yeah,
Man, you can kill big bucks with one eye.
yeah.
So nobody has any excuses out there.
I know.
All right, so quick, let's go through like your bow and arrow specs. A lot of people are interested in that kind of stuff. Hunting public, every video they do, they've got everything laid out, like what they're using. Neil, what kind of bow? What's your brand of bow? And
Currently, right now, I'm shooting Hoyt. I've gone through quite a few different companies. I mean, I got into archery in 2010, and as we kind of talked about, that was to expand my time to hunt. That's why I got into it. And so since then, I've shot Hoyt, I've shot Elite, I've shot Expedition. I'm trying to think what else. Prime. I had one of those at one point. I'm probably missing another company. But just for the draw length that I have of a 31-inch draw length, I kind of settled in on Hoyt. So this year I'm probably going to upgrade. I had the RX3 from a couple years ago, and going to end up going with the RX5. I got to give a shout out to More Sporting Goods in New Hampshire. Those guys I trust, and Randy Gagne as far as archery. And so this year I said, hey, is it worth making the upgrade to the newer bow? Because sometimes you get comfortable in a bow. Why upgrade? Why
right.
change? And so there is technology improvements, and there's certain things that go on there. And so I felt, obviously this year, there was enough of an improvement to make that change. So for me, I like, it's like, a bow that feels comfortable to you. For me, the string angle is something that, having a bow that's set up to fit, a longer draw length is really good and important to me. Axle to axle, my personal preference is 34-inch axle to axle. I don't like carrying around a yardstick in the woods where it's, a long, crazy, just hard to maneuver, hard to swing through. But the string angle for me is a little too steep when it comes to those, 30-inch axle to axle bows. So that's kind of my preference.
what's your draw weight?
So I'm usually 70 pounds. I've thought about going to 80. I've pulled back, some of the guys John Petrick, he, has the 80-pound, the 80-pound bows.
80 is a lot.
It is. I work in fitness, so it's not really the pulling it back. It's late season. It's like when I'm bundled up, I just always kind of think it's like, hey, if 70 pounds is going to be enough, it's going to get the job done. As far as arrow setups, I'll run, a heavy arrow setup. Depending on what type of arrow I'm running, it'll be 500 and something grains. Then from there, something that I'm a big fan of is I'll usually either get bare shafts, or if I do get, the arrows that have the vanes already on them, I'll go with the helical twists. So I'll, set up my own arrows. For the head up front, I just usually run 100 grains. I'll run an insert up front, though, to get a little more FOC.
Brass insert?
Yeah, depending on the type of arrow, they all have different, components and, different systems to add more weight up front. But then in addition to, having a little bit of extra, grains up front, as far as broadheads, I'll usually tip it. I really wanted to go fixed because there's just a lot of advantages to running a fixed head. I had initially, when I got into archery in 2010, I just bought 6, 7 different types of broadheads, and I just said, okay, what's going to shoot the best? I'm a novice archer. I just want to be accurate. So I tested, a ton of different heads, and I just found one in particular that worked really well for me. But then after having a few problems with that, which you're going to with any head, you're going to have some type of issue. I just decided it was time for a switch. I tried like hell a whole entire summer. It was driving me nuts to make fixed heads at the speed of the bows that I'm shooting with a draw length that I have.
Yeah.
It's just, I couldn't tame it. It just, the bow seemed like it was tuned perfectly. Everything I had gone through, and it wanted to pass 35 yards. It wanted to drift to the right every time.
And you can't fix that with a helical going one way or the other?
I tried every friggin' different vein you could imagine.
Yep.
Helical, 4
Just
veins,
too
3
fast?
veins. And I think that was it. I was running with, a finished arrow it was close to 550 grains. So the heavy arrow setup, trying different veins, I was still getting almost 300 feet per second, which doesn't sound super fast in itself. When you're talking an arrow that's that heavy, it is still cooking along pretty good. And I've heard tons of different stuff. I'm not, the archery expert, but through that journey of doing my own setups, listening to a ton of stuff, I kind of found that sometimes there's like a threshold where it's like if you get above a certain speed that it's like because in the front of your arrow it's like you have a broadhead there. It's not the same as a field point. You're going to start to get some drag or drift.
Yeah.
And it just seems like once you get up, that 290 or above, sometimes it just starts to want to wander off.
And do you have a kisser button on your string, or what do you use for an anchor point?
So for me, I mean, as far as an anchor point, I started off using a kisser button. I mean, I think having those things for consistency when you first get into it is really important. I end up, just as far as an anchor point, I still use, like a finger release. I've tried, thumb releases, back tension. I like practicing sometimes with thumb releases. But for me, I'll run, it's a Scott Wildcat. It's a short release. Because another thing that I had learned, when you end up doing any type of archery, you don't want to, have target panic. You don't want to be flinching. So when you're thinking about like pulling a trigger, you want to squeeze a trigger on a gun.
Yep.
So when you're talking a release for a bow, you don't want to have it on the pad of your finger. You want to put it like in kind of like the knuckle of one of your joints, so that when you pull your finger works from your knuckle of your hand. It works all the way down the chain to the tip of your finger. So when you go to pull that trigger, you want it like in one of those knuckles further back. So I shoot a shorter release because of that. And yeah, as far as anchor point, I just stick the knuckle of my hand in my earlobe and just have an anchor point there. So
You got a stabilizer on your bow?
yeah, I mean, I've run short, long, tons of different stabilizers. I mean, luckily now with a lot of the bows they're making, you don't even really have a need for a stabilizer.
Yeah.
The RX3 that I had a quick detach stabilizer that was on it. It was like 10 inches, and I just found that it was a different float with the stabilizer versus without it. And after a while, I kind of liked the float without the stabilizer on. It was easier to control, so...
I'm getting bored from this. I know a lot of people fucking love.
Yeah.
I'm getting bored.
I didn't hear. I don't know anything about any of that.
It's
Me
one
with
of
my
those,
blind handicapped ass. I
Pat just
literally
blacked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily like, I've learned this stuff and I get into it, but yeah, it's like I love the hunting aspect of it. So the gear stuff, some people
But gear
love
stuff,
it.
like, yeah, I mean, it's important, but
I mean, you can spend too much time
right.
like getting into it. As I said, it drove me nuts all friggin' summer. So I wasn't spending as much time out scouting. I wasn't doing it. So that's where for me, I ended up, going back to a mechanical. It's simple. It's easy. It's going to work. You don't have to.
What's
think
the actual
about it.
brand? Did you say the brand of broadhead you're using?
Right now, I'm using Autolock. I mean,
I
Autolock,
haven't heard of that one.
New Hampshire company.
Okay.
So it's
New Hampshire's got a lot of good, like, homegrown companies.
yeah.
You got a muzzleloader? Do you have a Woodman?
I just ordered one. I visited Timmy the other day.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting a Woodman. But, I mean, New Hampshire company, freaking best muzzleloader on the market.
If you haven't put one in your hands, people, like, I was sold. I love my muzzleloader that I've had for years. It's gotten the job done. But when I put it in my hands, I had to have one. I mean, it's just, it balances perfect in your hands. It carries right. And it just felt like this is the gun. And for people that I've talked to that have those, the Patriots, they've said if this thing shot multiple rounds at once, if it wasn't a muzzleloader, this is the only gun I'd ever hunted with.
Yeah, just use it like a rifle.
Yeah.
And then I know New Hampshire's got a couple base layer companies that are good too. Minus 33, I use a lot of their stuff. They're out of Ashland, New Hampshire. And then there's Burgeon. I don't know if you heard of them. They're out of Lincoln, New Hampshire, another base layer company. I mean, there's just some really good homegrown.
Yeah, there's minus 33. That's another.
Yeah, that's the one.
company.
That's the one I said. Yeah, I wear their stuff for base layers.
Yeah.
I love it. Merino wool stuff. Yeah, Pat, what do you real quick?
I literally
know,
got a crossbow.
I know we're bored, but what do you use for for your specs? Crossbow,
Literally, yeah.
like one from ancient times.
I should. No, I was somebody who was always I was always a gun hunter. So same thing as Neil.
Like all of us.
Same
all
thing
three
as
of us
Neil.
here.
Me and Neil went to like competing high schools in Maine and just didn't know it. He was
Really?
in Belfast. I was in Winslow. So
They definitely did not get along. Belfast and Winslow.
You were battle rapping in your.
I'm a confused kid, man. I grew up in like housing projects
You're-
and got transplanted to Maine and then came back here and wanted to go back to Maine. I don't know where I still don't know. I'm in the tree stand like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all over the place. So for me, I was always a gun hunter. And my older brother, he bow hunted a little bit. And he was trying to get me to go with him a bunch. And it was kind of like the last minute, it was like July or something like that. And he's like, you got to bow hunt this year with me, come on. And he had just, messed up his shoulder and was getting a crossbow. And he was like, dude, he's like, all I had to do was fill out a thing for my doctor and I got it, you know. He's like, you're fucking blind anyway, man. He's like, just go to your doctor and get a note. And I didn't think anything of it. Now that I have hindsight, I wish that I didn't, but I really haven't even shot bows, you know. So I kind of like took that loophole just to gain more time of the season. So I'm literally the case that most bow hunters look at, like, cockheads are going to get in there and do it early because and that literally was the circumstance for me. Is I wasn't exposed to bow hunting. I was always in Maine, gun hunting, tracking, big wood stuff. And then once I came down here, my older brother had lived down here and he bow hunted for 20 years or something like that, but he went to the crossbow and it was just a quick decision for me. I didn't even think much of it, but the problem with the state is you're supposedly not able to go back, which seems kind of nuts because it's a permanent disability, but I mean, I probably could have learned eventually how to
shooting with their feet and things like that.
Yeah,
so you train yourself to shoot it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's my thing. But I mean, I still feel like I think there's totally advantages with it. If Neil's in the stand and I'm in the stand and he's at full draw and a buck's standing there, and there's going to be a point where he's going to have to let down. Where I can just stand still and just wait it out and then smash him 12 minutes later if he doesn't move,
Yeah, the motion of drawing. There's a lot of
I think that's it. But to me, I also feel that getting within 30 to 40 yards of a 4 to 5 year old deer is a huge piece of the challenge.
Yeah.
So
it's not like you're shooting at 100 yards of that thing.
Oh yeah, no, I couldn't shoot.
And I'm like
40 yards in most of the thick spots I'm in.
Right. And I've got an interview lined up with at some point. The PR person's got to get back to me with Mass Wildlife, and we're going to talk about some stuff. And I think I'm going to bring up people's whatever people want to bring up as possible rule changes and stuff, like the setbacks people always talk about. That crossbow rule where you can't go back is one that people talk about all the time. So during that, like, people, if you're listening, send me an email or send me like a message, whatever you want me to talk to Mass Wildlife about, the fish and game. And I'm also going to line up an EPO podcast and talk with EPOs about rules and regulations and all that stuff. But you reminded me of that with the whole you can't go back once you start shooting a crossbow.
Yeah, they gotta. Yeah.
So yeah. What else, guys? What do we want to do? I mean,
don't you want to ask me about the speed of my broadheads? Dude, my draw length and shit?
Yeah, do you shoot like 1,000 feet per second?
No, I think it's like 420 or something like that. But
yeah, I've got a crossbow over here that I bought for Vermont because Vermont changed their law this year to anybody can shoot a crossbow up there.
They're going to do that here too.
They did that in southern New Hampshire too.
Yeah, and Vermont is a lot hard. Like my deer camp, like I've mentioned multiple times, it's big woods. Hunting with a bow in big woods, it's like way different than suburbs. It's just like your chances are way lower, and not that increases it very much. But I was like, hey, they're gonna let me shoot a crossbow in Vermont. Might as well get one.
The one an advantage of crossbow that I'll say, and I learned this kind of this year through a couple of my buddies, is the deer that I've shot with the crossbows literally like don't go far. I mean, I have 5 to 10 examples this year of close friends of mine who've like wounded great bucks and we've never found them with conventional
think it's like
bows.
What do you think it is?
In a couple of these
speed and
I don't know. I mean, a couple of these guys are like true archers. I mean, they've been doing it 20 plus years, and I don't know. I just think the accuracy's better, obviously, and there's just more power when it hits. It's like, I mean, it sounds like it's
you
hitting.
can shoot a little bit bigger heads. I feel like, right? The diameters.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I don't know.
Yeah. Nowadays, the technology. There's some. I think Raven just came out with a 500 feet per second one. I mean, that's cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's nuts. I mean, the deer that I've shot with them, it blows through them. It's no like it's in the shoulder. You probably blow right through the shoulder and out the other shoulder. It's just so powerful. So I mean, the one advantage is you're gonna kill the thing. You
Are you getting a double barrel one now? Have you seen that?
No.
They literally came out. It's it's an over-under crossbow.
I literally want to go backwards. Like I truly want to. I'm gonna purchase a regular bow this year and learn how to shoot and all that stuff anyway. But like I said, for me it was one of those split-second, last-minute decisions. Now that I have the hindsight, I feel like I don't want that to tarnish my skills as we move into the future. I don't want that asterisk on my name. Like,
Yeah,
hey, he's
but
got a
it's
bunch
not-
of good bucks, but it was with a crossbow.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you could say the same thing about gun hunting, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You still got to find the deer, and you still got to get within range of. I mean, they're at such an advantage. It's crazy.
Let's real quick before we end this one, because we talked about it earlier, was you know what you said. Like we were bringing up like scouting, looking at maps, and Neil brought up the fact where you say like it was something like, you know, you gotta like make the roads disappear when you're scouting. Don't look at the roads as a boundary. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, we were just talking the other day, and we were talking about certain pieces, and you know, with both of us kind of having the big woods history within us, and looking at stuff from that perspective always. You know, we were just having a conversation the other day, and we were talking about a specific patch of woods, and you know, I was just saying that I don't think it's nothing for the deer to cross these roads and end up. So sometimes I think you overlook stuff, and I know I've done it a ton too, where I've had tunnel vision, and I've known a buck is in a specific area, and I've got pictures of him in this area, and I end up hunting that area, and I kind of, you know, just think of this little corner patch of woods or whatever it is, and I base my strategy around that particular area, you know. I don't expand beyond it and say, well, I mean, how much time is he spending across the street? And I'm starting to do that now, but it took a while, because I feel like once you capture, you know, you get some daytime intel on a good buck in a certain area, it almost makes you want to be like, all right, I got him, this is where he is, you know. But
yeah.
they roam, man. They go wherever there's no pressure. So, like Neil says all the time, it's the last spot you'll think of. The spot you walk by all the time and you're like, there's nobody going there, you know? That's where he's probably spending 90% of his time, is right where you just not even thinking. You know, I have a couple spots now that I'm thinking of, even for the electric buck. I'm like, he's probably right there.
Yeah, and freaking the hunting beast there. What's his name again?
Dan Infalt.
Yeah, Infalt, dude. Like, I was watching a video that he has on YouTube called "Dating the Fat Chick," and it's like one of the best videos. And he's exactly the same. He's like, listen, you gotta look at the places that are overlooked. Go where the majority of the hunters aren't. A lot of times, he's killed big bucks right next to the freaking parking lot in a public access point. Like, you know, when you're dating a fat chick, you don't want your friends to know you're dating a fat chick. You also don't want your friends to know that you set up 100 yards from a public parking lot. But if that's where the deer's hiding out, you can go in there and get them.
I have a story on that. There was, a spot, in Massachusetts where, it's heavily hunted public land. You pull in there any morning, there's going to be a dozen trucks in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And there's these trails leading out of the parking lot. And I remember talking to a lot of the hunters there, because a lot of them knew who I was. And so we got talking. It's like, all right, guys, like, I'm just kind of curious. Like, I don't want to blow up your spot, but let's kind of figure out where everyone's going here. And I'm just kind of curious. And so, of course, it was predictable where everyone was going to go and hunt. And the next day I said, all right, let me just go scout this one area. It's just outside the parking lot. It's just in from this path that, the hikers and walkers and everything go on. I think there might even been some porter potties over in this one corner. Just stupid spot, right?
Yeah.
You go in there, perfect buck bed. Like, he could see everyone in the parking lot, what they were doing. He had spots to bail out, blow down tree. And it was that same, dating the fat chick scenario. It's like nobody would be caught dead saying, hey guys, I'm going to go over here. You're going to watch me with my headlamp.
And I remember you getting pictures of the biggest buck in that patch over there, because I remember us talking about that. I had it last year. And then you ended up getting pictures of them right there too. That's hilarious.
It's crazy. It's like sometimes where they'll go, as long as hunters won't go there, that's where they're going to be. And I've talked to people time and time again that, like us, we've hunted bucks for years and years and years. Well, you don't get them for a reason, because they're not where you're hunting them. Then all of a sudden, it's like if you think, okay, there's a piece of woods I haven't been. Well, if I haven't thought to go there, nobody else has thought to go there.
Yeah.
So that's where he's going to feel the safest.
I've been just like trying to get a lucky shed. I was telling him, like, I know it's early. I've ran into your nephew
a couple
a bunch of
times.
times. But I was out in conservation where you can't hunt. Great place to find sheds. Obviously, you can't hunt there, but if there's a big one, you can try to find in the butter. And first time I went there a couple weeks ago, this isn't the place where I ran into your nephew, but I parked there, and immediately I get off the trail. There's a main trail going in, and everybody's walking their dogs and stuff in there. And I immediately get down next to the swampy area where the parking lot's at and follow the edge of that, but off the trail. As soon as there's a place I can cross the swamp, I do, and then I hug the swamp back towards like where I was parking. And of course, that's where I start seeing a bunch of sign. I see some scrapes, I see some big rubs, and then I get to this giant community and annual scrape. I mean, there's a root that's like that high that was exposed, but on either side, like their hooves over years have just taken all of the dirt out of there. And there's a beautiful freaking signpost rub right there too. And I turn around and I can see my Jeep parked in the parking lot. It's just on the other side of the swamp, and it is a perfect place for a big buck to sit. The trails don't even come close to this thing because it's a thick, nasty little swamp there. And I think that buck lives right there.
Well, and that's another thing that I've heard Pat, he mentions all the time. It's one thing that I've taken from all of our conversations is that he hates, like, if you leave anywhere, he hates walking on the trails. He's like, why would I not walk through the woods?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you're not going to find deer sign on a trail.
Yep.
It's like on the tote road. So you got to hop in the woods, and they will go adjacent to walking trails. They'll go adjacent to roads. So don't be afraid of just whenever you're walking back to your truck. Yeah, it's the easy route to say, okay, I'm going to walk the last half a mile on this walking path back. But no,
You miss a lot.
yeah, you're gonna.
Yep.
Yeah, you say that all the time.
Yep.
You're gonna miss it.
Well, and you might find a freaking, like I've heard you'll find a shed like so close to a parking lot, a lot of the times. And
It's just think about it. A lot of times with me in good sized patches of woods, you park in a parking lot and you're trying to get as far away from people as you can.
Yep.
So you hoof it down the road, however far, and then you cut into the woods. I start, as soon as I get out of the Jeep, I'm literally like over a rock wall, and I'll try to get to where I'm going a different way every time, just to force myself. I'll be like, this is a long way, and it's probably gonna be bullshit, but here we go, I just found something the other day that the trail I took into the woods half of the hunting season this year, I took this like kind of off the beaten path trail that's someone cut. I took it 30 times probably hunting this year, and just about a week ago as I'm walking in, I like look over, maybe 100 yards from literally a street. And I look over and I'm like, that looks like a rub, So I like walk through the thick stuff and look, enormous scrape and a huge ass signpost right there that I've walked by 30 times this season, and it's in a perfect spot. So you overlook a ton if you just are staying on the roads and the main roads. So you gotta just explore,
get off trail.
Yeah, climb right through like a thorn bush. I mean, I got scars all over my legs and shit from climbing through the nest.
Yesterday was the second time I'd been back to this place, and I went back to where that big scrape was, where the roots were dug out, and I had brought a camera with me, so I just want to see what's in there. And I'm in there, and I get two does. I jump some deer, and there end up being two does, and they circle around me, and then I keep going. It down to where that annual scrape was, and I'm standing there deciding, like, all right, do I put the camera up here? It still wasn't fresh, whatever. And then I hear more crunching, and I look up and I go, damn, is there another deer coming in on me? What the hell? How did I miss that? And I look up, and it's a lady, and she's way off the trail on the backside of this super thick swamp too, and she's got an iPad in her hand, and she's walking on a stone wall, and I just go, hey, what's going on? Like, we were just like two people off trail, and she's like, oh, I'm just mapping these stone walls, for ancient Indian, I think this is an ancient Indian stone wall and stuff. But it's just funny when you get off the trail, that's the kind of stuff you run into. This lady was like, this stone wall that we were walking, she believes is like an ancient stone wall, not settlers. It was Indians that made this one.
It's funny you say that. I literally was talking to my buddy the other day, and I was saying that. I was like, we give all this credit to the first settlers that came here for building these rock walls. And if you get into some big woods in New England, you'll see that these rock walls go for miles. And if you look at them on satellites, some of them are dead straight for like miles.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at it like, all right, you got these first settlers that came here. They're starving. They're hungry. They're trying to figure the world out. and the first thing they're going to do is just start fucking building rock walls for like miles throughout the woods. Like, really?
Yeah.
Like, just, it's so calculated.
Well,
I was wondering that the other day, too. I was like,
cool
I wonder how much of this could have been here before.
We're just sitting there talking to like two people off trail. She goes, "Oh shit, I didn't expect to see anybody off trail. I never see anybody off trail." And I'm like, "Yeah, me either. Like, I love going off trail." And you know, we had a cool conversation for 20 minutes, and she believes that some rock walls are aligned like with the stars and in these patterns that you know, have spiritual. Some spiritual like connections to them and stuff. So she spends all her free time walking and mapping out rock walls in Massachusetts.
That's crazy. I mean, I literally just said
looks
that
at
the
them
other
for
day.
patterns. Yeah,
I just said that the other day because there'll be. I mean, look at next time whoever's listening, next time you go on Google Earth or something and you find an area where you know there's a rock wall, if you can see it on the map.
she said north-south. This one was a perfect north-south one, and those are the ones that have the spiritual like star.
I've seen some crazy ones that go for miles, like 4 or 5 miles, just dead straight through the middle of the woods. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the same
Oh
thing.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. I mean, whether it's the most rock walls that I see are Massachusetts and Maine. I mean, there's just tons of rock walls. I don't see as many in New Hampshire, but
yeah, and you don't hear much about it in the history books either.
Of course, they were like the settlers did it to divide property lines and stuff, but
why was it that important to, like, if you think about it, you know, like, especially back then, it was like it wasn't like there was a high population of people. It'd be like, we ended up out here. Oh, you over there? All right. I'll stay on this side of the river. You stay on that side. No,
Jebediah Smith was coming a little bit too close to my property line.
So we're going to spend the next 40 years and dig up rocks and then pile them on top of each other. They're huge, bro.
They didn't have like tractors to move them. Yeah.
No, they had ox, you know?
Oxen.
Yeah.
they had a lot of kids to move the rocks.
I mean, I grabbed one the other day and lifted it. I was like, Jesus. I mean, I don't know. But who knows? We'll never know.
There's tons of history out there in the woods, that's for sure. Whether it's the old foundations, it's like the wells. I mean, I know one spot in New Hampshire, I was hunting for a while, they talked about the old Kings Road and, like, you know, coming through and taking tariffs and stuff off the road. It's just, you just think about, like, what was in these woods before we started roaming them.
Yeah, that's why I started doing the metal detecting thing. My buddy who's, you know, he's a great hunter, too, and he kind of got me into that. I think he did it partially to keep me out of the woods because I'm in the woods so much. He's like, give the deer a goddamn break.
Give them in a fishing pole and a metal detecting device.
Get him out of here.
We're going to do a podcast at some point about your metal detecting story.
Dude, I found some crazy stuff.
Really cool stuff.
I found some cool stuff.
But we'll leave you guys cliffhanged on that one and end this podcast. And it was awesome. Thanks for coming, guys, and thanks for chatting.
Great time.
Yep.
So we'll see you again next week, guys. Thanks for listening to the Hunt Suburbia podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. We're going to release an episode every single Sunday throughout the season, throughout the entire year, and we will possibly be releasing some bonus episodes here and there throughout the week as people, you know, come in freshly off a bow kill and tell their stories. We hope that happens throughout the season. There might be weeks where you get 2 or 3 bonus episodes. You might not get one for a couple of weeks, but there will be some bonus episodes. But you can count on us every single Sunday to have a new interview on throughout the season. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Big bucks I've been dreaming often, every night till I'm in a coffin. Vermont woods to the burbs of Boston, I'm looking for a tree to get lost in. Crisp mornings, little dust in the snow. Quality time, just me and my bow. Fall evenings, I know just where to go for some quality times for me and my